Chapter 121. But the intruder girl obviously didn't want to let go of ruining her master's reputation. She instantly let out an even more shrill cry. "Prince, what did you do to the princess? Was there a need to do this?" The servant girl's shrill cries instantly extinguished the screams of the noble maidens outside. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Which prince and which princess were these? They deeply felt that the Li Palace had never looked at the almanac for the wedding. What happened here? Xian Zhao, old concubine, finally rushed over with people. Seeing the crowd at the door, she asked in a deep voice. Xian Zhao, old concubine, also knew that it was probably not a good thing. There were not many people who came with her. Only a few of them seemed to be hard to refuse. But in Yi Li's eyes, there was no difference. "Old concubine, here." Yi Li hesitated and said, "Let the young ladies go out to rest first." Xian Zhao, old concubine, looked at Yi Li with a flicker in her eyes. She nodded and said, "Princess is right. The young ladies have been frightened. Please go out to have a cup of tea and rest for a while." Everyone naturally agreed. One by one, the young ladies left the place with a strange atmosphere. Yi Li followed the crowd and prepared to leave with the crowd. But she was stopped by Yi Ying, who was standing beside Xian Zhao, old concubine. "Third sister, can you stay? We don't know what happened here." Xian Zhao, old concubine, also nodded and said, "Yes, it's good that Princess Ding is here. If anything happens, she can be a witness. Let's go in and take a look." Yi Li didn't know what expression she should show. She laughed dryly and said, "In that case, it's better to ask the two inside to tidy up and then come out to meet us." Xian Zhao, old concubine's expression changed slightly. She shouted in a deep voice, "Impudent, come out." A sobbing sound came from inside, followed by the sound of people scrambling around. Not long after, a tall figure followed by a petite girl came out from behind the screen. "Leah, why are you here?" Old concubine Xian Zhao says harshly. The tall man's clothes are messy and his face is ashen. If he is not Mo Jingli, who should be entertaining guests in the front hall? "Prince!" Yi Ying screamed, pointing at the two people who came out. Her delicate body was on the verge of collapse. Everyone's gaze shifted from Mo Jingli to the woman behind him. Just like Mo Jingli, the woman's clothes were disheveled and her hair was disheveled. Her coquettish eyes were still filled with tears. Some ambiguous light red marks extended from her neck to her collar. "Princess Xixia." The voice of the Marquis Nan standing next to Consort Dowager trembled slightly. Even though the emperor had not officially taken Princess Xixia as a consort, how could they, the noble families with their own information channels, not know that the palace was preparing for the coronation ceremony? Even the Ministry of Rites had decided on the title. Looking at Princess Ding, who was supporting Yi Ying, the Marquis Nan immediately made up her mind. "Consort Dowager, Princess Ding, it's really inconvenient here. Let's go out first." Yi Li nodded, "Madam is right. Consort Dowager, let's go out first." Consort Xian Zhao glanced at Mo Jingli and Princess Xixia with an ugly expression. She nodded, "Princess Ding is right. Let's go out first. Tidy up and come out immediately." When they returned to the hall, the other womenfolk had been sent to other courtyards to rest by Consort Dowager. Yi Li and the others naturally could not leave for a while. Seeing the stiff and ugly expressions of the Marquis Nan and the other madams who came with Consort Xian Zhao, Yi Li felt much better. Anyway, she had nothing to do with it. She could just treat it as watching a play. Yi Ying sat next to Consort Xian Zhao and sobbed, making the originally gloomy and stagnant flower hall even more gloomy and depressed. Consort Xian Zhao was impatient with her crying. She glanced at her and said coldly, "Shut up. You only know how to cry." Yi Ying did not care that Consort Dowager was angry. This sudden incident was the biggest blow to her. What was more devastating than her beloved husband rolling around in bed with another woman on the same day as his wife? Prince did this kind of thing. Why did Consort Dowager scold me? It's not my fault. Consort Xian Zhao said impatiently, "Shut up and sit aside." Such a big thing had happened. Even if Consort Xian Zhao wanted to hide it, she could not. Moreover, there were too many people here today. Just by looking at the expressions of the womenfolk on the way here, They knew that most of them knew what had happened here. Consort Xianzhao would not deceive herself. She directly sent people to the front hall to invite a few royal relatives who were close to Li Wangfu over. At the same time, she sent someone to quickly report to the Empress Dowager who had not left the palace to support her son's wedding. When the royal relatives came over, Mo Jingli and Princess Xixia were almost done tidying up and walked out one after the other. Yi Ying saw that although Princess Xixia had carefully washed up, her eyes were still full of love and she looked shy after making love. She wanted to pounce on her and tear her apart. "You slut!" Princess Xixia looked at Yi Ying who was pouncing on her and screamed in fright. She took a step back and fell into Mo Jingli's arms. Yi Ying's eyes immediately turned red with anger. "You adulterous couple! You bitch, I'm going to kill you!" Everyone hurriedly pulled Yi Ying back, comforting her. It was such a mess that the few people who had just entered the door frowned. Yi Li turned back and saw Mo Xiaoyao come in. She smiled faintly and ignored the mess at the side. She slowly walked over. "Why are you here?" Mo Xiaoyao raised an eyebrow and looked at Consort Xianzhao who was sitting on the main seat with an ashen face. Consort Xianzhao had invited a few of Mo Jingli's uncles and imperial brothers. Among them, the Prince of Dingguo, who had the highest rank, could not be left out. Moreover, Princess Ding was already here. There was no difference if Prince Ding was added. "Jingli, what the hell are you doing?" An old prince with a white beard and an extraordinary aura was so angry that his beard was blown up. He snorted and pointed at Yi Ying who was crying at the side. "This is the princess that you want to marry no matter what. And today is your wedding. You invited so many people. What is the meaning of this? You've disgraced your imperial father and imperial brother." Mo Jingli's face was ashen. The corner of his mouth moved, but he did not say anything in the end. This old prince was only the late emperor's elder brother who was still alive. He was also the only uncle of Mo Jingqi and his brother. Naturally, he had great power. Even Mo Jingli did not dare to disobey this uncle. Another prince who was a few years younger pulled back the angry old prince and said, "Second brother, calm down. Let's sit down and listen to what Jingli has to say. Don't scare the child." This one's temper was obviously much better, but he also looked at Mo Jingli with displeasure. The remaining two were Mo Jingli's elder brothers. In the early years, for the sake of the throne, they did not have a good relationship with Mo Jingli and his brother. After listening to their two uncles, they found a place to sit down and watched the show. Chapter 122. "Why is Li here?" Mo Xiaoyao asked softly. Yi Li looked at him helplessly. "I just happened to bump into her." Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and did not ask more. He pulled Yi Li to sit beside him. Other than the sobbing Yi Ying and Mo Xiaoyao, who had a calm expression and half covered his face, everyone else in the hall was probably very embarrassed. After all, what they were going to talk about now was rather unusual. What was even more unusual was the people involved. One was the younger brother of the current emperor, and the other was the emperor's chosen future concubine. Although the imperial family had seen all kinds of dark and filthy things, everyone knew to cover their faces. But at least everyone knew that they had to find a cloth to cover their shame. It was rare to see something like this happen in public and spread to almost all the noble ladies in the capital in an instant. "Shut up. What are you crying for?" The old prince was also annoyed by the never-ending voices. He slammed the table and scolded angrily. Yi Ying was startled, and her crying stopped immediately. She stared blankly at the old prince with a face full of tears and did not dare to speak. The old prince snorted softly and then looked at the virtuous consort. "Consort, what is going on? Something like this has happened, the emperor. How would he explain it to the emperor?" The old prince also knew why the virtuous consort Zhao had invited them over. The emperor would definitely be angry if such a thing happened. Mo Jingli had committed adultery with the emperor's concubine. Even killing him would be a light punishment. But the virtuous consort certainly did not want Prince Li to die. The Empress Dowager certainly did not want this. The emperor probably did not want this either. Also, the emperor probably did not want to offend Nanzhao right now. Then, They had to plead for Prince Li and give the emperor a way out. The virtuous consort sighed and said, "I don't know what happened either. I just heard that something had happened here and hurried over. I saw." Yi Ying snorted and said shrilly, "What else could have happened? Wasn't it this slut who seduced the prince?" Yi Ying. Old concubine Xian Zhao frowned and stared at Yi Ying sternly. "Pay attention to your status. Don't treat yourself like those uneducated shrews. If you don't want to stay here, go back to your room." Yi Ying bit the corner of her lips and turned her head away without saying anything. The old prince frowned and looked at Mo Jingli, who was standing in the middle of the hall, and asked, "Jingli, you should be greeting the guests in the front yard at this time. Why are you in the ladies' resting area? Don't tell me you've forgotten the basic etiquette after getting married." Mo Jingli had always been cold and arrogant. He had probably never encountered such an embarrassing situation in his life. Moreover, this was in front of Mo Xiaoyao, his enemy since childhood, and Yi Li, whom he thought he had abandoned. This realization made him feel even more embarrassed. His entire face was filled with boundless anger. Someone sent a message to invite I over. "So, after coming over, you made love with the emperor's concubine in bed?" The young prince sitting on the side sneered. The ridicule in his eyes was obvious. These princes and Yi Li had met once before. The man who spoke was Mo Xiaoyao's half-brother, Prince Yi, Mo Jingyi. Mo Jingli's face was gloomy as he shot daggers at him. Mo Jingyi didn't care. He sneered and simply raised his head to look at the roof. "Who sent the message? Who did you come to see? Even you can't enter the ladies' resting area without permission. Don't you know this rule?" Uncle Wang on the side also frowned and questioned. Everyone was in a bad mood. They were just attending a wedding and encountering this kind of situation. If it was an ordinary girl, they could just let Mo Jingli take her in. However, it was a princess, and a princess who had already been selected to be the emperor's concubine. After being dragged in by old concubine Xian Zhao, they had to get involved in this muddy water even if they didn't want to. At this time, everyone looked at Princess Xixia like they were looking at a slut. How could Princess Xixia not know what everyone's expressions meant? She hurriedly shook her head and said, "No. It wasn't me. I never sent a message to Prince." The old prince snorted. He stroked his white beard and cast a sidelong glance at Princess Xixia, saying, "You didn't? Then how did Prince Li happen to be in the princess's room?" At that time, if the ladies weren't drinking tea and chatting, then the young girls would be playing in the garden. Why did the princess happen to be in the room? More importantly, Zhao Yang didn't seem to have come to the wedding banquet. Then why is the princess here? The old prince threw out questions one after another, seeming a bit aggressive. However, everyone who wasn't in a good mood clearly didn't have the energy to sympathize with Princess Xixia, this foreign princess. Princess Xixia shook her head in a panic. She didn't have the arrogance she had seen before. Looking in panic at the expressionless people in the parlor, Princess Xixia's eyes suddenly lit up. She pointed in a direction and said, "It's her. She must have framed me and the prince." Yi Li, who had been shot while lying down, realized that her guess from a few days ago hadn't been wrong. All foreign princesses had problems with their brains. "Put down your hand. Otherwise, I don't mind if you never use your hand again in this lifetime." Mo Xiaoyao looked calmly at the agitated Princess Xixia and said coolly. Princess Xixia couldn't help but shiver. She unconsciously moved closer to Mo Jingli and didn't see the resentment that flashed through Yi Ying's eyes. "In the Da Chu state, she is the only one I have a grudge against." Princess Xixia bit her lip and said, "And Prince Li also has a grudge against her. This is something everyone knows." Princess Xixia wasn't stupid. She knew very well that if she was thought to have seduced Prince Li, with her status as the future imperial concubine, even if the Da Chu state killed her, Nanzhao wouldn't stand up for her. Therefore, she had to push all the responsibility away. But at this moment, she really couldn't figure out who wanted to repay her. Of the people present, only Yi Li had a grudge against her. Therefore, pushing the blame onto her was the best choice. "Princess Ding." Everyone stilled. Yi Li helplessly sighed and softly said, "Princess, His Highness and I only arrived at the prince's mansion with His Highness in the afternoon. After that, we went to see the old imperial concubine and the other madams. Around the afternoon, fourth sister and I left. We chatted in the garden for less than a quarter of an hour. After that, we met up with the 3 young ladies of the Hua Mansion, Qin Mansion, and General Murong's mansion. After that, we stayed in the garden to chat. There were many misses in the garden. I believe that everyone can testify. Also, when we found the 2 of you, it wasn't even 5 in the afternoon. In other words, it wasn't even 2 hours since I arrived at the Li Wang Fu. In reality, the only thing that could make people suspicious was the time I spent with fourth sister. That is, it was 5 in the afternoon. Princess Xixia didn't seem to have received the invitation and arrived at the Wang Fu before me and Prince. May I ask, what does Princess think this consort needs to know that Princess is in the Li Wang Fu and your exact whereabouts in a short 15 minutes and then have someone send a message to lure Prince Li over? Chem. Yi Li's words not only clearly explained her whereabouts, it also washed away the suspicion of her collusion with Yi Ying. Haha, Princess Consort still missed out a bit, and still needs to deduct Prince Li's and Princess Consort's time. Therefore, Princess Consort Ding doesn't even have a quarter of an hour. Chapter 123. Hearing this, everyone looked at Princess Xixia with even more unkind expressions. She had done something so shameless, yet she still dared to accuse Princess Ding first. Princess Xixia froze. She didn't really hope to convict Yi Li just like this. She only hoped to stall for time to let her breathe. She didn't think that Yi Li would expose her lie right there and then. Princess Xixia, who didn't know what to do, could only cry bitterly, woo-woo. It really has nothing to do with me. Enough. The silent Mo Jingli stared at Yi Li for a long time. He suddenly said in a low voice, "You don't need to force her anymore. I will take responsibility." Bang. The old prince slammed the table in anger. He glared at Mo Jingli, his face green and white. His finger trembled as he pointed at him. "Bastard. You'll take responsibility? What responsibility? What do you think you're doing? A man dares to take responsibility for his actions?" Mo Jingli giggled as he walked up to support the old prince. He giggled as he said, "Imperial uncle, calm your anger. Li Wang probably forgot that Princess Xixia is Imperial brother's Imperial concubine Xia, our brother's sister-in-law. Calm your anger, calm your anger." If he hadn't said anything, the old prince wouldn't have been so angry. Now that he said this, the old prince's anger reached another level. "Bastard thing. What happened to your sense of propriety, justice, integrity, and honor? Forget it. I won't care about this matter. I can't care. You can do whatever you want." In a fit of anger, the old prince threw away his responsibility. The virtuous concubine hurriedly comforted, "Prince, calm your anger. Jing Li is insensible, that's why he said such disgraceful words. As his uncle, Prince, please don't blame him. Your Majesty. Your Majesty." The old prince glanced at her, softly snorting, "Insensible? He really is insensible. Isn't it because you've spoiled him? Look at the things he's done this year. Which one of them is something a normal person would do? I think that sooner or later, he will be able to pierce through the sky." Ever since Mo Jingli insisted on breaking off the engagement, the old prince had been very dissatisfied with this nephew of his. The engagement was bestowed by the late emperor when he was still alive, and the other party was the granddaughter of the Shu family. As long as that Miss Yi didn't do anything serious, you should endure it no matter how dissatisfied you are. Now, it seemed that this third young Miss Yi was fine. On the contrary, it was the fourth young Miss Yi that he wanted to marry who was not presentable. Old concubine Xian Zhao hid the displeasure in her eyes and could only try her best to smile at the old prince. The emperor didn't need them to say anything. If they really let Mo Jingli pass by like this, the emperor's anger would probably cause him to lose a layer of skin even if he didn't die. When the old prince finally put out the fire, he continued to ask, "Where did the messenger go? Don't tell me you don't remember what he looks like. Also, who brought Princess Xixia in? A few days ago, there were rumors about Prince Li and Princess Xixia. Zhaoyang Princess was very polite. After the emperor gave the decree, she kept Princess Xixia from going out. Even this time, Jiaoyang Princess didn't come to Mo Jingli's wedding. Then how did Princess Xixia come? I. Princess Xixia said in a wronged voice, when I came, the people at the door didn't stop me. She had come early and had come to the Li Palace many times before. Many people in the Li Palace knew her. So even though she didn't have an invitation, the people in the palace didn't stop her. The steward of the Li Palace came in to report that he had found some spices used to liven things up in the room. The people in the room were speechless. Princess Xixia had come to the Li Palace by herself, but the servants of the Li Palace didn't report to the master and didn't know. And Mo Jingli didn't know what was going on. After hearing the message, he completely ignored the rules between men and women and came to where the womenfolk were resting. Then, this wasn't a coincidence, this was melodramatic. Yi Li silently said in her heart. It seemed that the beauty that the emperor hadn't gotten was destined to fly away this time. All right, wait for the Empress Dowager to come before dealing with it. Also, quickly send someone to inform Jiaoyang Princess to take Princess Xixia back. The old prince said impatiently. He turned around to look at Mo Xiaoyao and added, Xiaoyao, what do you think? Mo Xiaoyao's smile was gentle and polite. Prince is the elder. Everything will be decided by you. The other people also quickly expressed that they would follow the old prince's lead. Fortunately, the Empress Dowager was still very concerned about her youngest son. Before Jiaoyang Princess arrived, the Empress Dowager had already arrived. Of course, this was also because the Li Palace was the closest palace to the Imperial Palace. The Empress Dowager was wearing a bright yellow phoenix robe. She angrily rushed in and said, Ijia hasn't even left the palace and you've already sent someone to say that something has happened. What has happened on such a happy day? Haven't you lost enough face at the last wedding? On the side, Yi Ying's face paled. It was a pity that she didn't dare to face the Empress Dowager directly. She could only hide on the side and not make a sound. Everyone stood up to greet her. The Empress Dowager sat down and listened to the old prince and Xian Zhao Taifei recount what had happened. Without waiting for the two to finish, the Empress Dowager was already furious. She fiercely scolded Mo Jingli. When the Empress Dowager scolded her son, she naturally didn't dare to interrupt and could only listen. A few madams who had nothing to do with this matter wished that they could bet their ears and secretly swore in their hearts that they would not come to the Li Palace again after a few days. When the Empress Dowager finally finished venting her anger, Mo Jingli and Princess Xixia were kneeling on the ground, begging for forgiveness. The Empress Dowager looked at Mo Jingli for a long time. Her expression finally softened. She gave a long sigh and said to the old prince, Brother Wang, what do you think should be done? The old prince stroked his beard and said, since the Empress Dowager has graced us with her presence, this matter should naturally be decided by the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager's expression was somewhat sorrowful as she sighed and said, this matter really has damaged the Emperor's face. Even if Ijia comes out to plead for leniency, I'm afraid it will be difficult to appease the Emperor's anger. The old prince naturally understood what the Empress Dowager meant, speaking of which, Jing Li did such a shameful thing. It's because us uncles didn't discipline him properly. I and Brother Wang will personally go to the palace to plead for Jing Li. We only hope that the Emperor will give I this face. The Empress Dowager smiled gratefully and said, Brother Wang is the Emperor's most respected uncle. The Emperor will definitely not disrespect Brother Wang. Li quickly thank your uncle. Mo Jingli said in a deep voice, Jing Li thanks uncle. Thank you Uncle Wang. The old prince gave a snort and didn't pay attention to him. Receiving the old prince's promise, the Empress Dowager was naturally very satisfied. Even though the old prince didn't care about court affairs, he had a lot of prestige among the imperial relatives. As long as he was willing to plead for leniency, most of the princes would give him face. Even if the emperor was angry, it wouldn't be good to punish him heavily. Xian Zhao Taifei was also very satisfied. Looking at Mo Jingli and Princess Xixia, she asked in a quiet voice, Empress Dowager Jejie, this Princess Xixia, what do you think? The Empress Dowager furrowed her brows and said, Ijia will go back and discuss with the emperor. After a few days, we'll think of a way to let her enter the family. The Empress Dowager didn't hide these words from the noble women present. Princess Shishia's status was different. Unless she didn't need to see anyone for the rest of her life, this matter would spread sooner or later. Now that she had spoken, everyone present was smart and naturally knew what to say and what not to say. Chapter 124. I don't agree. I also don't agree. Two female voices came from inside and outside, causing everyone to be stunned. The person inside was naturally the pale-faced Yi Ying, who was on the verge of collapse. Outside, Princess Lingyun was wearing a red dress that was as beautiful as fire. Her red veil was lifted up, but it did not come down. Her almond eyes were currently releasing flames. She stood at the door and looked up at the people in the hall as she said, "This princess does not agree. You Eastern Chu people should not think of humiliating this princess like this." Beside Princess Lingyun, Lei Tongfeng swept his eyes over the people in the audience and said in a cold voice, "Empress Dowager, isn't Eastern Chu going too far by doing this?" Before one wave had subsided, another wave came. Before anyone could speak, Princess Lingyun had already walked into the hall with large steps to Mo Jingli and Princess Shishia's side. In front of everyone, she quickly and fiercely slapped Princess Shishia's face. Slut. Half of Princess Shishia's face turned red and there was even a trace of blood coming from the corner of her lips. As if she still felt that it wasn't enough, Princess Lingyun raised her head to slap her again, but she was grabbed by Mo Jingli. "Have you caused enough trouble?" Princess Lingyun gave a disdainful laugh. She threw off Mo Jingli's hand and said with a cold smile, "No matter how much trouble this princess causes, I would not shamelessly seduce the groom at someone else's wedding. This kind of trash is actually a country's princess. You really are losing face for all princesses. I heard that you've been clinging to King Li since the beginning. You could hook up with whoever you wanted before, this princess did not care. But doing this kind of thing at this princess's wedding is provoking this princess." The Empress Dowager knit her brows and said in a deep voice, "Princess Lingyun, King Li and Princess Shishia were innocent and were framed. If you have any dissatisfaction, this widow will have King Li apologize to you. Right now, in front of all these princes and madams, don't cause trouble." Princess Lingyun gave a cold laugh. She raised her hand to take off the red veil on her head and threw it to the ground as she said, "Apologize? This princess can't accept it. This princess doesn't want to marry anymore. What do you guys want to do? Anyway, if there's this bitch, there won't be me, and if there's me, there won't be her." Xian Zhao, old concubine, said, "What does princess want?" Princess Lingyun said proudly, "Let King Li kill this bitch personally, and this princess can pretend that nothing happened." What? Everyone was shocked. Mo Jingli shielded Princess Shishia behind him. He stared at Princess Lingyun and said, "Are you crazy? She is the princess of Nanzhao. So what? I am the princess of Shilling. How could this princess be afraid of a mere Nanzhao small country?" Princess Lingyun raised her eyebrows. Lei Tongfeng coldly looked at everyone and said, "It seems like Lingyun was right. Eastern Chu does not place my Da Ling in their eyes. Since that's the case, I don't think there's a need to hold today's wedding." "Prince Li, don't you agree?" Mo Jingli remained silent. Princess Lingyun coldly snorted and said, "Brother Wang, now you see. They don't place us in their eyes at all." Lei Tongfeng indifferently looked at Princess Lingyun and said, "Pack up your things, we're going back. Immediately go to the palace and say goodbye to the Eastern Emperor Chu. We'll leave in a bit." "Yes." Princess Lingyun disdainfully looked at Princess Shishia and Mo Jingli. Her eyes did not have the shame of the wedding being abandoned halfway. It was clear that she was very satisfied with this. "Your Highness, this matter can be discussed. This is related to the relationship between our two countries, so Your Highness shouldn't be impulsive." The old prince gave a sigh and stood up to persuade him. Lei Tongfeng indifferently said, "Many thanks for Prince's concern, but Eastern Chu has gone too far in this matter. It wasn't my Shilling that was rude first. I believe that even if we go to the Eastern Emperor Chu, it won't be our fault. Prince Ding, Princess Ding, I ask the two of you to uphold justice. Don't the two of you agree?" Yi Li secretly hated Lei Tongfeng for slyly dragging them into this. In front of everyone's eyes, she revealed a somewhat reserved smile and said, "Your Highness, This matter is indeed His Highness King Li and Princess Shisha's fault, but there are still many questions that have not been answered. The most important thing is that this matter was an accident. Our Eastern Chu's sincerity towards your country is without a doubt. This point, I believe your highness won't deny it, right? Didn't you bring Princess Lingyun here for a marriage alliance? I don't believe you're willing to bring her back. The old prince looked at Yi Li with praise and said with a smile, Princess Ding is right. If King Li has let down Princess Lingyun, we will do our best to make it up to Princess Lingyun. If this affects the friendship between our two countries, that is not good. I ask your highness to reconsider. Seeing Lei Tongfeng reveal a thoughtful expression, Princess Lingyun knit her brows and anxiously said, Royal brother. Lei Tongfeng glanced at her indifferently, then looked at the Empress Dowager and said, Lingyun is the princess that imperial uncle dotes on the most. When she's at home, no one can bear to let her suffer the slightest grievance. I wonder how Eastern Chu wants to make it up to Lingyun. Princess Lingyun slightly trembled and revealed a trace of disappointment on her face. However, under Lei Tongfeng's indifferent gaze, she did not dare speak again. The Empress Dowager said in a deep voice, What kind of compensation does your highness want? Lei Tongfeng's eyes flashed and he said in a clear voice, The future King Li's successor must be born from Lingyun. Most importantly, Princess Shishia could never have the status of a concubine or anything above a concubine. She can never have King Li's flesh and blood. Once these words were said, everyone present, no matter if they were male or female, old or young, couldn't help being stunned. They looked at Lei Tongfeng with eyes filled with surprise and dissatisfaction. No one dared to believe that Lei Tongfeng dared to raise such a bold condition. It had to be known that King Li had already married his first wife before marrying Princess Lingyun. Lei Tongfeng's condition was clearly asking that King Li's first wife, who was of noble birth in the Da Chu state, could not give birth to King Li's heir before Princess Lingyun. The most important thing was that having a royal descendant with the Western Tombs bloodline was not something that any member of the royal family would be happy to see. This is impossible. Without even thinking, the Empress Dowager sternly refused. Lei Tongfeng raised his brows and said with a smile, Since it's like this, then there's nothing more to say. Goodbye. As for today's humiliation, I, Da Ling, will remember it in my heart. After speaking, he turned and pulled Princess Lingyun, saying, Let's go. Princess Lingyun had originally thought that this marriage would continue. She hadn't thought that her royal brother would give her such a pleasant surprise. Of course, she didn't say anything else. She glanced at Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li who were sitting on the side listening, and turned to quickly follow Lei Tongfeng. On the day of King Li's marriage, the bride's cousin immediately pulled the bride and left. No one knew if the matter of King Li and Princess Shishia had spread through the capital, but the news of Princess Lingyun abandoning King Li and leaving on the day of the wedding had spread through the capital in an extremely short amount of time. Lei Tongfeng brought Princess Lingyun back to the embassy. He sent people to lock up the joyous Princess Lingyun in a room and didn't allow her to come out. Then, he swung his arm and placed her in the deepest part of the embassy. He kicked the door open and entered. In the room with dim candlelight, the black-clothed woman was leisurely leaning against the soft couch and reading a book. When she saw him enter, she slowly sat up and said with a smile, You're back? Was Lingyun's wedding fun? Pa. Lei Tongfeng stared at her for a long time. Suddenly, he fiercely slapped her face that was covered by the veil. Slut. I told you not to act rashly. The black-clothed woman fell back onto the soft couch because of this sudden violence. When she recovered, she raised her head and fiercely glared at the man in front of her. She gritted her teeth and said, Lei Tongfeng. Chapter 125. Slut. What do you want to do? Do you really think that I don't dare to kill you? Lei Tongfeng's gloomy eyes contained a ruthless aura and the words that came out of his mouth did not have a trace of warmth. The black-clothed woman froze and quickly reacted. She chuckled and said, You brought Lingyun back, right? Ha, ha, in any case, you didn't agree to the marriage alliance with the Da Chu state. Isn't this what you wanted? What are you unhappy about now? You idiot. Lei Tongfeng angrily scolded, Who do you think you are? There are many hidden talents in Dongchu's capital. Who do you think you can fool with your little tricks? Get up, we will immediately leave the capital. Leave. The black-clothed woman froze and there was some hesitation in her eyes. Lei Tongfeng coldly laughed and said, "It's fine if you don't want to leave. In a moment, I will send someone to send you to the Prince Ding mansion. Haven't you always been thinking about Mo Xiaoyao? Don't worry, when we return to Xiling, this prince will properly explain for you." "No." The black-clothed woman screamed and stood up. She grabbed Lei Tongfeng and said, "I'll go with you." No one understood Mo Xiaoyao better than she did. If she really fell into his hands, she would definitely die without a sound. Lei Tongfeng disdainfully pushed her hand away and turned to leave. Bold, afraid of death, and greedy woman, the wedding at the Li Palace had become a ridiculous farce without any accidents. What was worse was that the bride had run away before the wedding had even begun. Very quickly, the Li Palace's masters, including King Li, Princess Consort Li, and Consort Xian Zhao Dowager, were all summoned into the imperial palace by the emperor's edict. The bride was gone, the groom was gone, and the masters were gone. The guests naturally could not stay and freeload. Hence, the guests who had drunk a stomach full of tea and did not manage to eat anything could only take their leave. Not long later, the bustling Li Palace once again regained its tranquility. However, for some reason, the red gauze that was decorated with lanterns and colored banners seemed a little dim. Because the emperor did not summon Prince Ding and his wife into the palace, Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao, who had attended the wedding halfway, also left the Li Palace with the other guests. However, as soon as he stepped out of the Li Palace, he ran into Shu Qingchen, who he had not seen for a long time. Shu Qingchen had always been elusive. Even the members of the Shu family might not be able to see him whenever they wanted to. After Yi Li got married, she had only seen him once on the day she returned home. She was a little surprised to run into him now. After exchanging a few pleasantries, the three of them moved to Chuseong Pavilion to have a meal. "What does Prince think about today's matter?" Shu Qingchen took a sip of the wine in his cup and softly praised, "Everyone says that Chuseong Pavilion's wine and food are the best in the capital. It really lives up to its reputation." Yi Li lowered her head to eat while listening to the two's conversation. After the entire afternoon, she was really a little hungry. Brother Shu's information is indeed very fast. Mo Xiaoyao praised. Shu Qingchen did not ask what had happened. Instead, he directly asked for Mo Xiaoyao's opinion. This meant that he clearly knew what had happened in the Li Palace. Shu Qingchen acted as if he did not hear his words. He softly sighed and looked at Yi Li with a little sadness. "Li, why is your husband unwilling to call me big brother?" Yi Li's throat choked and she forced herself to swallow. She then raised her eyes to look at Mo Xiaoyao and then looked at Shu Qingchen. The corner of her mouth could not help but twitch. Shu Qingchen was younger than Mo Xiaoyao by 3 years. It would be strange if Mo Xiaoyao was able to call him that. Moreover, even if Mo Xiaoyao was able to call him that, he would still have to call Shu Qing's a second brother and even Shu Qing by fourth brother. Mo Xiaoyao handed a bowl of soup to Yi Li. He watched her drink a mouthful before turning to Shu Qingchen with a faint smile. "Brother Shu, you're only Li Li's cousin." Shu Qingchen smiled. "I don't mind if Prince calls me eldest cousin." A sharp glint flashed across Mo Xiaoyao's eyes as his lips curled up slightly. "Then, this king thinks that Brother Shu should still remember. This one was once indebted to Mr. Qingyun for guidance in his studies. And you are Master Qingyun's grandson." "I am Master Qingyun's student." Or perhaps Ai's grandmother seems to have the same surname as the first madam of the Shu family. They were from the same family. In terms of age, they were 2 generations apart, but in terms of seniority, they were actually of the same generation. Yi Li of course understood that Shu Qingchen did not have any intention of making things difficult for Mo Xiaoyao. He was just joking. Yi Li took a handkerchief and lightly wiped the corner of her mouth. She smiled faintly. "Big brother, when did you start caring about how you address people? If Prince really does address people the same way I do, wouldn't that make the most handsome man in the capital look old?" Shu Qingchen calmly swept his gaze over Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li. He saw Mo Xiaoyao's natural action of handing the soup to Yi Li and a trace of satisfaction appeared in his eyes. Hearing Yi Li's words, He pretended to be displeased and glared at her. He lightly sighed. As expected, once you're married, you're siding with an outsider. Father and second uncle must be regretting agreeing to marry you off so early. The only girl of this generation of the Shu family, she had become someone else's. Yi Li's beautiful face flushed a faint red. She said, "Big brother, did you come here just to squeeze me?" Shu Qingchen shook his head. The smile on his face disappeared and he looked seriously at Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao pondered for a moment and said, "Does Brother Shu think that there's something wrong with today's matter?" Just now, Lei Tongfeng left the capital with Princess Lingyun. Shu Qingchen said, "They didn't even say goodbye to the emperor before leaving." Mo Xiaoyao's left hand unconsciously groped for the warm jade at his waist. He frowned and said, "Today's matter must have been secretly manipulated by someone, but it can't be Lei Tongfeng. The alliance with the Da Chu state was something that was decided long before he came to the Da Chu state. It's impossible for him to suddenly give it up. Unless something unexpected happened." Yi Li frowned and asked, "Has Lei Tongfeng's power reached the point where he can act on his own accord in this kind of matter?" The marriage alliance between two countries was definitely not a small matter, even if both countries had bad intentions. But Lei Tongfeng could break the agreement just like that. Even if Mo Jingli was in the wrong first, if word got out now, Shilling would be in the wrong. Shu Qingchen smiled faintly and said, "It's not Lei Tongfeng who has this power. It's his father, Genom of Gojosian, who has this power. The Emperor of Shilling is frail and sickly, and he only has a few princesses and a 7-year-old prince. Although Genom of Gojosian does not have the title of regent in Shilling, he is the regent in reality. Then, is the marriage alliance with the Da Chu state the Emperor of Shilling's idea or Genom of Gojosian's idea?" Mo Xiaoyao asked. Shu Qingchen shook his head. Shilling and the Da Chu state were old enemies. And the Shu family's information was not powerful enough to infiltrate the Emperor of Shilling's palace. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, "I will send someone to investigate." Yi Li felt that these two men were thinking too far ahead. She raised her eyes and asked, "Who let Princess Xixia into the Li palace?" No matter how familiar Princess Xixia was with King Li, no matter how normal it was for her to enter and leave the Li palace. She was also a princess, right? A princess came to the Li palace on the day of King Li's wedding, but the servants did not think to report to the master. This was very illogical. Shu Qingchen and Mo Xiaoyao were both startled. They stared thoughtfully and then exchanged a look. Shu Qingchen suddenly let out a low chuckle and sighed softly. "It seems that we have overlooked many things. These years, we are used to being free and unfettered. As expected, we are still not used to the capital." Mo Xiaoyao frowned slightly. Brother Shu is right. These years of seclusion, it seems that many changes have occurred in the capital that we are unaware of. I will send someone to investigate this matter. Chapter 126. Shu Qingchen nodded and said, "Leaving it to the prince, I am naturally at ease. I will be leaving the capital in a few days. I probably won't be able to intervene in these matters in the capital." Yi Li paused. "Big brother, you are leaving the capital? Returning to Yunju?" Shu Qingchen shook his head and smiled. "No, I plan to go to Nanzhao." "Nanzhao?" Yi Li didn't understand. "I remember hearing fifth brother say that big brother went to Nanzhao 2 years ago." Mo Xiaoyao held his wine cup and said with furrowed brows, "You think something will happen in Nanzhao?" Shu Qingchen sighed and looked at Mo Xiaoyao. "I don't believe you can see it. Right now, anything can happen. As long as they waited until the Ding King's household completely declined, the various powers suppressed by the Ding King's household would take advantage of the situation and swallow up the Da Chu state. No matter if it was Nanzhao, Shilling, northern tribes, or even the island countries overseas. Who didn't drool at the Da Chu state's most beautiful and fertile land on the continent? But the people in power only saw the danger of the Ding King's household. On one hand, they thought of ways to suppress the Ding King's household. On the other hand, they were afraid of a second Ding King's household appearing. Generally, the Ding King's household was unwilling to support and nurture a new commander. Had they never thought about what the Dhu state would do if they lost the Ding King's household and a commander who could replace them? Or did the person sitting high on the dragon throne think he could use his methods of playing with power to be invincible on the battlefield? Big brother, you think Nanzhao will act first? Yi Li asked. Although the people of Nanzhao were valiant, they were not as good at war as the northern tribes or Shilling people. Besides, after Mo Xiaoyao swept through the southern border, the present Nanzhao might not be able to fight against the Dhu state. Xu Qingchen said, originally, it shouldn't be, but now, I fear that person will act first against Nanzhao. Achem. Yi Li raised her brows and looked sideways at Mo Xiaoyao. She saw agreement in Mo Xiaoyao's calm eyes. Is that person crazy? There were already endless disputes with the northern tribes and Shilling. If they also started a war with Nanzhao, weren't they afraid that the three countries would join forces and attack them? At that time, not to mention the fact that the Dhu state did not have any capable generals, even if Mo Lanyun and Mo Liufang were to come back, the Dhu state would be in trouble. Xu Qingchen sighed and said, although our late emperor was still young when he inherited the throne, the regent did teach him diligently. But our former emperor probably didn't have the time to teach them. It seems that the Empress Dowager taught them. When the previous emperor passed away, he was only 40 years old. Originally, he probably thought that he could live for another 20 to 30 years, so he didn't intend to nurture a successor so early to make things difficult for himself. Who knew that he would suddenly pass away? Although the Empress Dowager was known as a heroine of the generation, she was still just a woman in the harem. What she could really teach the emperor was scheming and scheming. Of course, it was also the Empress Dowager's methods that allowed Mo Jingqi to sit firmly on the throne after the previous emperor passed away. However, scheming and scheming could be used to seize power, but it could not be used to govern it. Although Mo Jingqi's goal was to become a sage, he knew in his heart that his ability to govern the country might not even be as good as his imperial father's. Therefore, he valued and was more careful about his throne. As long as there was someone who could threaten his throne, he would mercilessly eliminate them. Yi Li frowned and said, but Big Brother can't do anything even if he goes. What if he encounters danger? Looking at the two worried men in front of her, Yi Li couldn't help but sigh. This world was like this. Some people were racking their brains to worry about the country and the people, while others were scheming and scheming in the dark. Some people were suffering in their sobriety, while others were singing and dancing in their ignorance. Xu Qingchen smiled and said, I have some friendship with the Crown Princess of Nanzhao. I'm just going to see her. Crown Princess? Yi Li sighed at Xu Qingchen's wide circle of friends. Mo Xiaoyao raised his cup and looked at him, saying, many thanks. Xu Qingchen raised his cup in return, calmly saying, no need. This is father's idea. It's not for the sake of the Crown Princess. The Xu family would not betray the Dhu state, but the Xu family was not a savior. They had no power to turn the situation around. They could only do what they could do. After sending Xu Qingchen off, Yi Li understood that Xu Qingchen had specially come to say goodbye to them. Even Mo Xiaoyao had once praised eldest uncle for being one of the smartest people in the world. It was likely that when the news of Princess Lingyun's marriage failed, eldest uncle had already predicted the future of the Dhu state. Furthermore, before anyone, including the one in the palace, could react, he had sent eldest brother to Nanjiang. If something happens to the Dhu state in the future, the Xu family will not be able to escape, right? Mo Xiaoyao looked at her with a gentle gaze, softly saying, if you mean living in seclusion, then probably not. With the strength of the Xu family's character, they would not be loyal to the emperor, but they would definitely die for the Dhu state. Does Li know why the Xu family, as old officials of the previous dynasty, could still enjoy a good reputation in the Dhu state for hundreds of years without decline? Yi Li raised her eyebrows. Mo Xiaoyao said, during the last years of the previous dynasty, the world was in chaos. Actually, the last emperor of the previous dynasty was not a tyrant, nor was he a fatuous ruler. He had almost no shortcomings, but he was not suitable to be the emperor. The ancestors of the Xu family persisted in supporting the last emperor in times of crisis. Although they were a scholarly family, At least 7 members of the Shu family died on the battlefield. In the end, ancestor Mo Lanyun led an army to besiege the capital. At that time, the head of the Shu family personally went to the city to supervise the battle. The army fought for 7 days and 7 nights without success. The eldest son of Emperor Taizu was greedy for military merit and rashly advanced, dying in the chaos. Emperor Taizu was furious. He ordered the soldiers to kidnap the people near the capital and kill them outside the city every day. As long as the last emperor did not surrender, he would kill 5,000 people every day. Moreover, the day the city was broken, the whole city would be slaughtered. The next day, the head of the Shu family personally killed the last emperor and opened the city to surrender. The only condition was that the people near the capital and the people near it were not to be harmed. On the day the Dhu army entered the city, the head of the Shu family left a letter to his ancestors, then committed suicide. On the same day, Madame Shu led the 73 members of the Shu family to commit suicide. Only the youngest son of the Shu family, who was 13 years old at that time, was still far away in Yunju. He was later the prime minister of Dhu state, Shu Yanli. Yi Li was shocked by this secret that she had never heard of before. An unspeakable sadness choked her heart. She regretted and was annoyed that she had said such frivolous words to her uncle. Perhaps she did not understand the lofty character of a scholar, but as a soldier, she understood and deeply understood the unyielding character and loyalty of a soldier. She did not dare to imagine the disappointment and sadness in her uncle's heart when she asked such a question. That was simply blasphemy and the greatest insult to the ancestors of the Shu family and the 73 people who had committed suicide. Then, why? Yi Li lowered her eyebrows and asked. Mo Xiaoyao said, "You want to ask why it was different from what was recorded in the history books. There is no difference." Shu Yanli did assist the Dhu state's emperor with all his heart. The third emperor of Dhu state was even personally taught by him. After the founding of the country, Emperor Taizu also bestowed titles and enviable titles to all the deceased members of the Shu family. Looking at Yi Li's surprised appearance, Mo Xiaoyao calmly smiled and said, "Emperor Taizu killed too many people in his conquest of the world. He needed a benevolent reputation to stabilize the world." Chapter 127. What letter did the Shu family's ancestor leave for Prince Ding? Yi Li asked with some hesitation. Of course, things were not as simple as Mo Xiaoyao said. The great emperor would not be at ease to use a prime minister whose entire family died for the previous dynasty. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and smiled. This is not known. The ancestor seemed to have given the letter to the great emperor. That letter clearly saved Shu Yanli's life. Afterwards, the news of the Shu family dying for the people of the capital somehow spread. In addition, the Shu family had been a famous family for hundreds of years, so their reputation was naturally unparalleled. Although there were many taboos in the history of the founding of the great emperor's dynasty, many things were gradually ingrained in the hearts of the people. Even if many things were gradually forgotten, many people still inherited some things from the words of their fathers, such as the respect for the Shu family. Yi Li finally understood why the Shu family did not marry into the imperial family, even if they really did not hate them. But it was still undeniable that the Shu family had been exterminated because of the imperial family of the Dhu state. This could also explain why the imperial family did not give up the idea of suppressing the Shu family, even if the Shu family had always been indifferent to fame and wealth and did not like power. What Mo Lanyun did back then was probably not as simple as what Mo Xiaoyao had said. Yi Li rubbed her eyebrows with some distress and asked with some despair, "Will there definitely be a war? It's only a matter of time." Mo Xiaoyao sighed softly. The Dhu state has suppressed the other countries for too long. Almost everyone is impatiently waiting for the Dhu state to decline. And we seem to be used to thinking that we are the strongest. In fact, if it was not for the defeat 7 years ago, even he would think so. But when he dragged his broken body and left the battlefield with his brother's ashes and the Mohist army that had lost more than half of its elites, he realized how ridiculous his pride had been. Whether it was the Western Hill or the northern tribes, they might not be as powerful as the Dhu state, but they might not be weaker than them. The Mohist army and Black Cloud cavalry that had once swept through the world had used their hundreds of thousands of corpses to prove this point. Li, it was the Ding Palace that destroyed the Da Chu state. After a long time, Mo Xiaoyao finally said this in a low voice. If it wasn't for the fact that the Ding king's residence had always been too powerful, the Da Chu state might have produced more famous generals and elite soldiers. If the Mohist army had not spent hundreds of years threatening the borders, the Da Chu state might have been able to go further in this crisis. Yi Li was silent. She didn't know who was right and who was wrong. The Ding royal residents had loyally protected the Da Chu state for hundreds of years. How many people in history could do that? Were they wrong? There was no doubt about it. Then was it the people they protected who were wrong? It wasn't that they didn't know anything. After a long time, Yi Li said in a low voice, "You are not wrong. It's the human heart that is wrong. Not every generation of emperors had the breadth of mind and courage to accept all rivers into the sea. Not every generation of emperors had the ability and magnanimity to make the four seas return to them. When the emperor no longer saw his officials as his right-hand man, but as his own threat. The excellence and achievements of his officials were more like a challenge and threat in the emperor's eyes." Hearing Yi Li's words, Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li in a daze for a long time. Then he said with a faint smile, "I'm sorry, Li. Did I scare you by saying this?" Yi Li calmly glanced at him. Was she someone who was so easily scared? Mo Xiaoyao shook his head. "It's useless to think about this now. Li, why don't you guess how the Li Palace's matter will be resolved?" Yi Li shrugged in boredom and said, "How else can it be resolved? The emperor angrily killed Princess Xixia and demoted Li Wang. The emperor was persuaded by the old princes and imprisoned Princess Xixia and gave a small punishment to Prince Ding. Or, Princess Xixia could marry Li Wang with a different identity. Yi Li felt that the Empress Dowager accepted Princess Xixia too quickly as a mother. Her eldest son's future concubine had a relationship with her second son. She only lightly scolded her and then started to plan to marry her. She didn't seem to consider the emperor's possible reaction. If it was a normal mother in this era, what they would do would be to kill the woman that could cause their son's brothers to fight. "Which one does Li think is more likely?" Mo Xiaoyao asked. Yi Li thought for a bit. "The third one." She frowned. Then what happened today? Was it someone else's scheme, or someone else's scheme? It looked like she needed to re-evaluate Mo Jingli's brain, or the brains of the people behind him. "Li, stay away from Mo Jingli in the future," Mo Xiaoyao reminded. Yi Li nodded absent-mindedly, her mind still thinking about the previous question. What use is the Princess of Nanzhao to Mo Jingli? Mo Xiaoyao seemed to be a bit surprised. He glanced at Yi Li and said with a faint smile, "She is the younger sister of the Crown Princess of Nanzhao. She is much more useful than Princess Lingyun." Yi Li's frown deepened. "If Mo Jingli really has that kind of brain, would I be much worse than Yi Ying?" Mo Xiaoyao seemed to smile even more happily. "Believe me, if Mo Jingli really has a brain, he would rather marry Princess Lingyun than marry you." Yi Li's face darkened. Was she being despised to this extent? But perhaps their wishful thinking is wrong. Mo Jingqi seems to never play his cards according to the rules. Although this emperor was not as great as he thought himself to be, the occasional attack from the side was not something that ordinary people could withstand. Thus, by the time they returned to the manor, news had already spread from the palace. Princess Xixia had died of illness. Of course, this news would only spread after a few days. After all, even if the officials and nobles already knew what was going on, they would tacitly understand. But they still had to think of a way to deceive the common people. Today, something had happened at the Li Manor, and Princess Xixia had died on the same day. As long as one was not an idiot, they would be able to connect the two events and imagine what happened. As for the Li King's marriage and Princess Lingyun, since there was no indication from the palace, everyone was happy to treat it as if it had never happened. The emperor did not appoint a marriage, and they naturally did not go to the Li Manor to send gifts. In any case, when the Li King married Princess Xixia again, they did not need to send gifts. They would just treat it as sending gifts in advance. In the palace, in the elegantly decorated and somewhat cold palace, Missouri Jingqi was recklessly venting his anger. The palace servants had long been scared out of their wits. Those who could not hide could only cower in a corner and tremble. All kinds of expensive antique paintings were smashed and torn to pieces on the ground. Tables, embroidered stools, and shelves were all kicked to the side. Noble consort Liu coldly sat on a carved couch at the side, coldly looking at the crazy man in front of her. A 7 or 8-year-old little girl in luxurious clothes was held in her arms with frightened watery eyes. She seemed to be scared stiff and did not even dare to cry out loud. Noble consort Liu raised a hand to cover the girl's eyes, looking at the crazy man in the hall. "Your Majesty, have you caused enough trouble?" Mo Jingqi was startled. He slowly stopped and turned back to look at noble consort Liu's cold face. A trace of hostility flashed through his hazy eyes. Chapter 128. "Come, take the princess away," noble consort Liu ordered. The servants kneeling in the corner hurriedly got up as if they had been granted amnesty. They took the frightened girl from noble consort Liu's hands and walked out, trembling. "My dear consort, don't you want to say something?" Mo Jingqi's voice was not as loud as it usually was in court. Instead, it was full of coldness and hatred. Noble consort Liu looked up at him. "What does your Majesty want me to say?" "You're laughing at me in your heart, aren't you?" Mo Jingqi pinched noble consort Liu's delicate chin and whispered in her ear. His cold breath was like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue. "I know, you're the same as them. No, you look down on me more than them, right? You're happy to see everyone against me, aren't you?" "Whatever your Majesty says," noble consort Liu said lightly. "Pa." Mo Jingqi waved his hand and slapped noble consort Liu's jade-like face. Immediately, several red marks appeared. Noble consort Liu raised her head and looked at him calmly. Mo Jingqi was stunned. "Shong-er." Looking at the red marks on noble consort Liu's face, Mo Jingqi pitifully reached out to touch it. "Shong-er, it's my fault. I shouldn't have hit you. Does it hurt? Why didn't you listen? Why did you always go against me? Why did you always care about this and that? Why did you threaten me? I hate being threatened." The more he spoke, the more agitated Mo Jingqi became. Soon, he forgot his pity and grabbed noble consort Liu's shoulders with both hands, shaking and roaring. "Your Majesty! Your Majesty! You've wronged noble consort Liu." A little maid suddenly ran out from the side hall and anxiously shouted at Mo Jingqi, "Your Majesty, please let go of noble consort Liu. It really has nothing to do with noble consort Liu." Seeing that Mo Jingqi ignored her, the little maid looked around and found an antique vase that had not been smashed. Gritting her teeth, she walked over and picked up the vase, wanting to throw it at Mo Jingqi's back. Noble consort Liu's expression changed. She quickly pulled off a beaded flower from her hair and threw it at the little maid. With a crack, the vase fell to the ground and made a crisp sound. The originally crazy Mo Jingqi suddenly froze as though he had been startled awake. The little palace maid was so scared that her face turned pale, and she knelt on the ground with a plop. When she picked up the vase, her mind was blank and she didn't have time to think. Now that he had sobered up, he remembered what would have happened if he had really smashed it down. Mo Jingqi had obviously calmed down. He glanced at the little palace maid not far behind him, slowly letting go of noble consort Liu and standing up. As soon as he got up, noble consort Liu sat up again. She was still solemn and indifferent. If it weren't for the red mark on her face, people would think that nothing had happened. "Shong-er, take a rest first. I'll ask someone to change your things later." Mo Jingqi only glanced at noble consort Liu, then quickly turned around and kicked away the little palace maid kneeling in front of him. He quickly turned around and left. Noble consort Liu stared at the figure that flew away. A trace of resentment and mockery flashed through her cold eyes. "Niang Niang." The messy palace hall was silent. After a long time, the young palace maid kneeling on the ground carefully called out. Noble consort Liu's face had returned to its usual calmness, as though nothing had happened. She said indifferently, "Get up." "What happened in the Li Palace today?" Mo Jingqi wouldn't go crazy for no reason. Today was the day of King Li's marriage. There was nothing important. Although Prince Ding's marriage had made him a little anxious recently, he wouldn't suddenly explode. So something unexpected must have happened today. The little palace maid thanked her and got up. She walked to noble consort Liu's side and whispered, "The Empress Dowager went to the Li Palace in a hurry, and then the Emperor summoned King Li, Princess Consort Li, and Consort Xian Zhao to the palace. After King Li left, the Emperor immediately came to see Niang Niang. I didn't have time to report this." Noble Consort Liu frowned. Summoned King Li to the palace? What about King Li's wedding? The little palace maid said, "This is what I wanted to report to Niang Niang. The wedding has been cancelled." It said that Crown Prince Genom of Gojosian of Shilling took the Princess of Shilling and left in a rage. It seems that something happened in the Li Palace, where the womenfolk are resting. Noble Consort Liu frowned and waved her hand. Send a letter back and ask Mother to come to the palace as soon as possible. Even if she was favored, she was always slow to get news from outside the palace. Yes, Niang 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 Niang. Niang Niang, the Emperor. Noble Consort Liu curved her lips and smiled coldly. It's nothing. He was probably bullied by the Empress Dowager. We'll find a way to help him vent his anger. The little palace maid pursed her lips and smiled. Niang Niang knows the Emperor best. But the old master sent a message to Niang Niang, asking Niang Niang to be careful of the Empress Dowager. After all, the Empress Dowager was a woman who fought her way out of the noble concubines of the late Emperor. Not only did she give birth to 2 sons, but she also defeated those women and princes and helped her son become the Emperor. The Empress Dowager was definitely not a woman who could be easily dealt with. Noble Consort Liu said lightly, "I know. The Empress Dowager is indeed powerful, but I'm not weak either." The Empress Dowager was indeed smart and powerful. But her biggest mistake was that she never understood what her son was thinking. Did she really think that Mo Jingqi was the only one who couldn't stand her desire to control everything? As long as a man had ambition, he wouldn't be able to stand it. It was just that some people didn't want to, while others couldn't. In the Ding Palace, in the secret training ground in the depths of the Ding Palace, Yi Li's face darkened as she stared at Qing Luan and Jin, who were using Qinggong to fly around in front of her. Qing Shuang, whose Qinggong was also not good, hid in a corner and laughed secretly. Even Mo Xiaoyao, who was sitting by the side, couldn't help but smile. Yi Li really didn't understand. With her body's coordination, balance, and other qualities, and according to Mo Xiaoyao, she had a good physique for practicing martial arts. Why couldn't she learn Qinggong? She could use the plum blossom pile as if she was walking on flat ground. She had even mastered internal energy, which was a mysterious thing in the eyes of modern people. Why couldn't she fly? Luckily, Mo Xiaoyao had found a set of Qinggong that was said to be suitable for women. Now, even Qing Shuang had learned it well, but she didn't feel anything. In fact, if it was a real battle, Yi Li didn't think there was much difference whether she knew Qinggong or not. Anyway, she didn't feel any pressure moving up and down a wall that was more than 10 feet high. She didn't think that people with good Qinggong could do better than her when it came to hiding. If it was a real close combat, Qinggong wouldn't be of much use. But wasn't it the dream of every martial artist in China to be able to move around freely? Since it really existed, based on the principle of having more skills, why didn't she learn it? "Li, what are you thinking about?" Seeing Yi Li's rare irritation, Mo Xiaoyao was very gentlemanly and didn't laugh at her. But from the light in his eyes, she knew that it wasn't that he didn't want to laugh. He just didn't want to laugh. Chapter 129. Yi Li looked resentfully at the 3 people scurrying around in the martial arts field and said, "I probably don't have the talent to learn Qinggong." You don't need much talent to learn Qinggong. Only very good Qinggong required talent. That wasn't something that could be determined by Qinggong manuals. Just like Mr. Feng Yu, Han Mingshi. His martial arts were only half as good as his inner strength. If not for his Qinggong, which was better than that of many top experts, he would have died many times over. This didn't make sense. Yi Li felt the veins on her forehead throbbing. This was beyond the limits of the human body. How could it not require talent and extremely high inner strength? Most importantly, It was impossible for humans to fly. What was Li thinking when you were using Qinggong? Mo Xiaoyao asked patiently. Yi Li was a little depressed, but she still carefully explained her thoughts to Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Li, if you keep thinking like this, you'll never learn Qinggong. You're using Qinggong while telling yourself that it's impossible for humans to fly. Yi Li obviously knew that this was almost like self-hypnosis. Normal people in this era didn't have this kind of problem. But Yi Li was different. Even though she was once the most outstanding warrior, even though people could fly in airplanes and even go into space. But at least the people of that era had a deep-rooted and indelible thought. That was, humans couldn't rely on their own bodies to fly. Therefore, Yi Li always subconsciously wanted to step on something to support herself. Once she couldn't find that thing and the distance between her body and the ground reached the limit of her consciousness, her body would subconsciously enter a state of self-protection and fall down. Li, Qinggong doesn't allow you to fly in the air. You still need support, but it's much smaller than people who don't know Qinggong. Maybe a treetop, or something small, as long as you can control it well enough. Yi Li looked at him expressionlessly. Mo Xiaoyao smiled helplessly. His right hand slapped the armrest of the wheelchair, and his entire body suddenly leaped up and headed towards the training field not far away. After a moment of surprise, Yi Li stared unblinkingly at his voice. She saw his hand quickly tap on a wooden stake on the training field, and then turn to another direction. Then it was on the treetops by the side of the training ground. The net that Yi Li had set up around the training ground finally fell back into the wheelchair. Did you see it clearly? Mo Xiaoyao asked with a smile. He reached out and plucked a yellow flower from the treetops and handed it to her. This doesn't make sense. Yi Li gritted her teeth and glared at Mo Xiaoyao. Was this a person who couldn't walk? Is that so? Actually, she was the one who couldn't walk, right? Chem? Mo Xiaoyao looked at her in confusion. I know. Yi Li took the flower and played with it. Let me think about it. Mo Xiaoyao smiled. I think Li is thinking too much. Or you can think about it. Imagine the peace you would feel if you fell from a 100-foot cliff. Without anyone to rely on, you wouldn't be able to turn anything. Naturally, you wouldn't be able to support yourself. Yi Li looked at him silently. She had really jumped from 100 feet, no, a few hundred feet. If that was the case, every paratrooper would become a Qinggong expert. I know, I'll try. Yi Li's try was to have a Jin bring her up to a 20-meter tall wooden pole by the side of the training field, and then, jump down. The first time, she suddenly fell from a height of about 10 meters. Yi Li was quite lucky as she was caught by a tree branch and fell into a sandpit by the side of the training field. The second time, she flew across half of the training field and couldn't find a place to support herself. She fell from a height of about 5 meters. Her body protected itself well, so she only got a few scratches. The third time, she lost control and crashed into a wooden pole on the training field. Yi Li was in so much pain that she didn't recover for a long time. The fourth time, the fifth time, Mo Xiaoyao sat by the side of the training field, quietly watching that slender figure jump down, fly up, and fall down again. Then she would climb up to check if there were any problems, jump again, and fall again. Mo Xiaoyao didn't stop her. He watched as she failed again and again, then tried again and again. For the first time, an intense and unfamiliar emotion appeared in his calm eyes. In his deep eyes, there was only that slender figure that kept falling and standing up. Mo Xiaoyao, you're actually abusing a woman? Feng Jiao's voice suddenly rang out in the quiet training field. The shadow guards who were silently guarding in the dark twitched their lips and almost fell from their hiding places. Feng Jiao walked over while fanning himself. He looked at Yi Li in the training field, then looked at Mo Xiaoyao who was sitting silently by the side. He shook his head and sighed. Yao, that's your wife, not your enemy. I didn't think that after these few years, you'd become even more uncaring towards women. Mo Xiaoyao raised his head and glanced at him without saying anything. Seeing Yi Li fall to the ground again and again, he wasn't in a good mood. After being snubbed, Feng Jiao rubbed his nose and silently stood to the side. After watching for a while, he asked in confusion, what is sister-in-law doing? Qinggong. Mo Xiaoyao said. Feng Zhiyao's expression twisted. His chin was almost poked by the fan. Qinggong. Isn't she afraid of falling to her death? These people had all learned martial arts since elementary school. Feng Zhiyao was born in the wild and had never been taught by a proper master. But he had never seen this kind of training method. Were women more desperate than men these days? As soon as he said this, he felt a cold glare on his body. Feng Zhiyao looked at the unhappy Mo Xiaoyao and smiled apologetically. He moved to the side to watch Yi Li practice. Yi Li had lost count of how many times she had fallen. When she was finally able to land on the ground, she felt as if she had been beaten up from head to toe. Her entire body was in pain. But inside, she gave a big sigh of relief. She felt that she had never been so happy and satisfied since she had come to this world. Clap 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 outside the field, Feng Zhiyao clapped his hands and raised an eyebrow at Yi Li in admiration. Qing Luan and Qing Shuang immediately gathered around. Qing Shuang's bright eyes were already red and swollen. She didn't care that there were people present as she hugged Yi Li Xiajie and started to cry. Yi Li looked at herself and laughed as she patted the little Yatu in her arms to have her stand properly. Then she walked in front of Mo Xiaoyao. Feng Gongzi, we meet again. Feng Zhiyao sighed and said, Wang Fei really opened this one's eyes today. Yi Li said helplessly, it's very easy for other people to learn, but it's very difficult for me. Since I want to learn, I naturally have to put in more effort. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said, Li, let's stop here today. You can go back to freshen up and rest. Then you can find a doctor to take a look. Feng San and I will be in the study. Yi Li nodded and smiled, it's nothing serious. It's just that it hurts a little. I'll go back first. Feng Gongzi, goodbye. Looking at Yi Li's back as she left with Qing Luan and Qing Shuang, Feng Zhiyao turned around and asked, Yao, what are you doing? The Shadow Guard and the Black Cloud Cavalry can't even protect the mistress of the Ding King's estate and make her learn self-defense skills? Chapter 130. Young Master Feng, it was Wang Fei who wanted to learn. The prince taught her, a Jin said. He had never seen anyone more stubborn and persistent than Princess Consort. If the prince did not allow him to teach Wang Fei Qinggong, he really felt that Wang Fei would break her neck because she was secretly practicing. It's better to have the ability to protect yourself than to have someone else protect you, Mo Xiaoyao said calmly. There was no flawless protection in the world. Even the Shadow Guard of the Ding Wang Fu could not completely eliminate danger. More ability meant more safety in the future. Feng Zhiyao shook his head and sighed. To have this kind of perseverance and courage, not many men can compare. I really find it strange. How did the Yi family raise such a daughter? Even the Shu family could not raise such a woman. The women of the Shu family could be overflowing with talent, and they could be extremely intelligent. But he had never seen someone like Yi Li. Mo Xiaoyao turned the wheelchair in the direction of the study. I didn't ask you to discuss Li. Feng Zhiyao stilled and smiled as he watched the person leave. A Yarrow wouldn't be jealous, right? Mo Xiaoyao's study had been moved to the newly married courtyard. This courtyard that had been specially prepared for Prince Ding and Wang Fei was the largest courtyard in the entire Ding Wang Fei. There was even an independent library inside. After Mo Xiaoyao moved in, the two quickly reorganized the room. The second floor of the two-story independent library was where the books were stored. The first floor was divided into two. One side was Yi Li's study and the other side was Mo Xiaoyao's study. Therefore, when the two of them stepped into the study and saw Yi Li sitting behind the desk with a book in her hand, Mo Xiaoyao wasn't surprised. He just asked, why didn't our Li rest for a while? Yi Li raised the book in her hand and said, it's not good to lie down and rest after practicing martial arts. I'll read for a while. Do you need to leave? Mo Xiaoyao shook his head, since you're not tired, then come and listen. Feng Zhiyao looked at the furnishings of the study. Hearing Mo Xiaoyao's words, he raised an eyebrow in surprise but did not express any opinion. Yi Li thought and then walked over with the book in her hand. Feng Zhiyao looked curiously. Achem? Princess, are you reading a book? Yi Li was holding a book called The Art of War. Yi Li looked at the book in her hand and said, I have nothing to do, reading to relieve my boredom. Reading military books to relieve boredom, such a special hobby. Feng Zhiao thought to himself, but his expression was one of interest. How do you feel? Not bad, Yi Li answered. Feng Zhiao was not sure what Yi Li meant by not bad. He quickly looked at Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao was not moved. He asked with a smile, what does Li Li think is not bad? Yi Li hesitated slightly before saying, the strategy is not bad, but the tactics. Maybe it was the difference between modern warfare and ancient warfare. Yi Li felt that many of the tactics written in this book were not reasonable, and could even be said to be whimsical. Of course, it was not that tactics could not be whimsical. In reality, the best commanders often had wild imaginations. But what was written in this book? In reality, Yi Li felt that it was more appropriate to call it a novel. This author definitely had never been on the battlefield, Yi Li thought to herself. Strategy? Tactics? Feng Zhiao raised an eyebrow. Yi Li felt a bit vexed, but her expression was very calm as she looked at Mo Xiaoyao and said, strategy refers to the overall plan and strategy of the war. Mo Xiaoyao glanced at Feng Zhiao and said calmly, tactics refers to the specific methods used to achieve the goal of the war, the deployment of troops, and the strategy to defeat the enemy. Do you understand? Feng Zhiao looked at the calm couple in front of him in dismay. Were they looking down on his lack of knowledge? What does Li Li think of tactics? Mo Xiaoyao ignored Feng Zhiao's expression and asked Yi Li. Yi Li shrugged. Compared to the Taizu Armament Code, I feel that this is more like a legendary novel. You've even read the Taizu Armament Code? Feng Zhiao screamed. Yi Li looked at him strangely and said, my uncle and grandfather both have the Taizu Armament Code. What's so strange about reading it? My uncle taught me. She wasn't lying. Her uncle had indeed taught her the art of war. But it hadn't even been a month, so the Taizu Armament Code definitely hadn't been finished. This sentence also explained why she knew so much about the military. The Taizu Armament Code was indeed one of the best military books she had ever seen in this world. Feng Zhiao silently thought to himself, how did you grow up in the Yi family and the Shu family? If you were born in the Murong family, with the way General Murong taught his daughter, perhaps there would be a female general in our dynasty. The Taizu Armament Code wasn't just a book. The book had a total of 29 volumes, recording the battles of 17 famous generals in the early years of Taizu's founding. There were also commentaries written by the Dingguo Prince Mo Lanyun. It could be said that it was one of the must-read books for the generals of the Da Chu state. There are many military books in the study in the front yard. If Yi Li likes them, you can go there to get them. Mo Xiaoyao said. This yard wasn't a place to deal with matters, so the books in the study were mostly poetry or miscellaneous books. There were also a few military books, but they weren't of the highest quality. Hearing this, Yi Li's eyes lit up. There were many books in the study, but other than the poems and biographies that she wasn't interested in, the only books left were history, geography, and travel books. She wasn't interested in the matters of this dynasty or the secret history of this dynasty, so she had already browsed through the history books before she got married. So she could only read things like geography and travel books. But this kind of scenery that she couldn't see and touch made her depressed. This couple, this grandfather has to give it to you. Feng Zhiao's heart twitched as he rolled his eyes. After returning to the main topic, Feng Zhiao looked much more serious and pleasing to the eye. He looked apologetically at Mo Xiaoyao and said, Yao, I'm very sorry. I seem to have neglected many things these years. Mo Xiaoyao looked up at him. What? Is there news from the Li Palace? Feng Zhiao nodded and said, Princess Lingyun thought she was smart enough to scheme against Mo Jingli. I'm afraid that she doesn't know that she was the one being schemed against. How so? Supposedly, the Li Palace has already found out that the incense in Princess Shisha's room was placed by Princess Lingyun. Princess Shisha's room was also placed by Princess Lingyun's people. But, the servant girl that Wang Fei said was the first to charge into Princess Shisha's room that day was not one of Princess Lingyun's people, nor was she one of Princess Shisha's people. It was a servant girl that Xian Zhao Taifei had brought out of the palace, Feng Zhiao said with a slightly serious expression. Yi Li asked with a frown, that servant girl. Feng Zhiao said, That servant girl was secretly killed that afternoon. I sent people to keep an eye on the Li Palace and Zhaoyang Princess's palace. When Princess Xixia was taken back, there was no servant girl with her. It wasn't until midnight that someone took a servant girl's corpse out of the back door and threw it into an unmarked grave outside the city. But that servant girl's face was disfigured before she died, and she didn't have anything to prove her identity. Chapter 131. Then how did you know it was virtuous consort dowager's people? Yi Li asked curiously. Feng Zhiao smiled proudly and said, the coroner found a little bit of jasmine-scented hair oil between the girl's fingers and on her hair. This kind of hair oil is said to be a special kind of hair oil from the #1 spice shop in the capital. It is very expensive. A small box costs more than 10 taels of silver. In the last 3 months, only 5 boxes of this kind of hair oil were sold in the entire capital. 2 of them were bought by virtuous consort dowager. Therefore, I guessed that the girl was virtuous consort dowager's hairstylist. Also, yesterday morning, virtuous consort dowager changed her hairstyle. According to the people I sent who are very experienced in dressing, that hairstyle was not made by the same person as the one virtuous consort dowager was used to. Yi Li nodded in admiration and said, therefore, the matter was that Princess Lingyun was not willing to marry Prince Li, so she schemed to help Princess Xixia enter the Prince Li palace so that she could openly break off the marriage? And it just so happened that virtuous consort dowager was not satisfied with Princess Lingyun as a daughter-in-law, so she beat her at her own game so that Princess Xixia could replace her? But this is not reasonable. How is it not reasonable? Feng Zhiao did not understand. Yi Li said, unless Lei Tongfeng was also involved in this matter. Otherwise, if Lei Tongfeng did not forcefully take Princess Lingyun away, no matter how much trouble Princess Lingyun caused, she still had to obediently get married in the end, right? This way, not only would her plan not succeed, it would also give her another opponent in the Prince Li palace. Or, did she just want to use Prince Li and Princess Xixia's weakness to threaten them? What if Prince Li and Princess Xixia were willing to fight to the death and tell the emperor about her plan? Even if she was the Xiling princess, she would not be able to escape. Li, why do you think Lei Tongfeng left in such a hurry? Mo Xiaoyao asked softly. Yi Li thought for a moment and said, Lei Tongfeng discovered that Princess Lingyun was being schemed against. Feng Zhiao nodded and said, if Princess Lingyun is still in the capital, once this matter is investigated, even if His Majesty doesn't want to punish her, it will be impossible. But now that he was gone, if the emperor didn't want to destroy the relationship between the two countries, then he could only pretend that nothing had happened. They couldn't possibly send troops to attack the West Hill just because of this, could they? However, with this mess, Lei Tongfeng's trip to the Da Chu state can be considered a waste. A good marriage plan had been ruined by that silly girl, Princess Lingyun. Lei Tongfeng would definitely be so angry that he would vomit blood. Yi Li sighed. She turned to look at Mo Xiaoyao and asked, should I be glad that I'm not worth his time and effort? Mo Xiaoyao smiled. Indeed, we should rejoice. After all these years, Jingli has really made me see him in a new light. Feng Zhiao curled his lips and said, I don't think so. The truly powerful one is the one by his side. If he really is that scheming, why would he give up and marry Yi Ying? Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, what about Princess Consort Li? She is the legitimate daughter of the Minister of Revenue and Yi Zhaoi's younger sister. Feng Zhiao said disdainfully, sister-in-law is also the legitimate daughter of the Minister of Revenue and Master Qingyun's granddaughter. Mo Xiaoyao, do you know why His Majesty is not worried about me marrying Princess Li? Asked Mo Xiaoyao. Feng Zhiao raised his eyebrows. Mo Xiaoyao said, the Shu family will not rely on anyone and will not help anyone fight for the throne. His Majesty understands this, I understand it, and Mo Jingli naturally understands it as well. It is impossible for him to receive any help from the Shu family. On the contrary, if he intends to raise an army or conspire to harm the people, the Shu family may even become an obstacle to him. Back then, the ancestors of the Shu family personally killed the emperor and did their best to assist the emperors of the Da Chu state. This was not a legend. However, Mo Jingli probably only thought that the Shu family was loyal to the emperor. After all, the true secrets were passed down between the emperor, Prince Ding, and the head of the Shu family. Even so, putting aside the Shu family, Yi Jiaoyi is also the legitimate daughter of the Minister of Revenue. She is also Minister Yi's legitimate daughter. At least third miss was betrothed by the late emperor. Feng Zhiao said. Yi Li pursed her lips and smiled faintly. I can roughly guess this. The two of them looked at Yi Li at the same time. Yi Li lowered her eyebrows and said, My father should be one of the Empress Dowager's people. He should know Prince Li's thoughts and the Empress Dowager's intentions. However, if he marries me, he probably thinks that Prince Li won't care about the Yi family in the future, but the Shu family behind me. However, fourth sister's birth mother's family is weak. If fourth sister becomes Prince Li's consort, perhaps the future will be completely different. The Yi family will rise to the top in the future. Right now, there is the Empress in the palace, and the favored concubine is noble consort Liu. There are also many princes. If father really is one of the Empress Dowager's people, he should know that second sister is not favored. Therefore, from the Emperor's point of view, the chances of second sister's child are not high. Moreover, it's not certain if the child can be born. Thinking back to the past few days, Yi Li really admired her father. Everyone thought that he married Yi Ying to Prince Li to support Yi Jiaoyi in the palace. However, they didn't know that Yi Jiaoyi was actually the spare chess piece. What a good plan. It was a pity that Yi Ying didn't choose well. If there were two Yi Yu, perhaps Yi Shangshu's plan could succeed. In fact, it wasn't these ancient people who were stupid. It was her who had always looked down on these people who was stupid. With old Madame Yi's shrewdness and Yi Shangshu's cautiousness, how could she think that the two of them were conceited just because Yi Jiaoyi was pregnant? What a surprising deduction. Feng Zhiao looked at Yi Li and said, Why does Princess think that Yi Shangshu is one of the Empress Dowager's people? Even the person on the dragon throne couldn't think of this. However, Princess Ding didn't guess wrong. Yi Li said faintly, Father seems to show dissatisfaction with Prince Li from time to time. However, he has never done anything to affect Prince Li. Since he has already married his most valued daughter to Prince Li, why does he always show dissatisfaction with him? It seems like he is doing it for everyone to see. Last time, the betrothal was Princess Lingyun. It was said that the Empress Dowager and Prince Li were not satisfied. Father's attitude was very tough. Of course, there was also the concern for fourth sister's future. However, this time, with father's intelligence, it is impossible for him to not see that Princess Shixia will definitely enter Prince Li's palace. Even if she changes her identity, Princess Shixia's position in Prince Li's palace will not be low. However, this time, father didn't seem to say anything. Even fourth sister was sent back by father on the day she went home. Fourth sister told me that father is already preparing to send fifth sister into Prince Li's palace as a Shu Fei in a month. He said it is to help fourth sister consolidate favor and prevent Princess Shixia from taking the lead. Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li and said with a faint smile, What Li Li said is correct. Yi Shangshu, for him to be able to ascend to the position of Shangshu so early, it is indeed related to the Empress Dowager. However, I am more inclined to meet the source of both sides. Yi Li blinked and said, You are saying that father plans to see which side has a higher chance of winning before betting on which side. The current paranoia is not something that normal people can understand. If Yi Daren is not loyal, he will not believe him. Chapter 132. Even though she had already figured out many problems, Yi Li still felt shocked. Her father, who looked smooth, was actually really smooth, and was muddle-headed when it came to family matters, was actually a double agent. But, what is going on with the Empress Dowager and the Emperor? Yi Li said. Feng Zhiao sneered and said, What else can it be? Our Empress Dowager is known as a heroine of a generation, the Yaoshun of women. In the past, she helped the Emperor ascend the throne when he was young, but our Emperor was not someone to be trifled with. In less than 3 years, he took back all the power and respectfully asked the Empress Dowager to retire to the inner palace to enjoy her old age. Something like power, it is fine if you have not tasted it, but once you have tasted it, it is easy to not be able to stop. The Emperor and the Empress Dowager have not been on good terms for a long time. This is something that many of the nobles in Jing know. Even though the throne will not change, the person on the throne can change. So, the one with the true ambition is not Mo Jingli, but the Empress Dowager. Mo Jingli naturally has the ambition, but he does not have the opportunity. Now that he has the opportunity, why would he not cooperate? The Li Palace is his residence. Without his permission, even the virtuous Zhao Dowager cannot do anything she wants. Yi Li was speechless. No wonder the Empress Dowager did not mind the brothers fighting. So she wanted her two sons to fight to the death. Power, is it really that important? Feng Zhiao stilled and said with a dim expression, it is probably very important to some people. After a moment of sadness, Feng Zhiao quickly laughed again. He winked at Mo Xiaoyao and said, how about it, Prince? Since the two in the palace have started to play their cards, should we also play a game? Or, should we kill them all? Kill them all? Mo Xiaoyao glanced at him, then you will clean it up. You will be responsible for killing inside and outside the palace. If there is a rebellion, you will be responsible. If the northern tribes invade, you will stop them. If Xi Ling also wants to participate, you will guard the border. Ah! Feng Zhiao rubbed his nose awkwardly. As expected, it wasn't difficult to kill a few people. However, the consequences of killing those people were very troublesome. Whether or not the Empress Dowager and her brother were secretly competing with each other was naturally not something that Yi Li could interfere with. However, whenever someone from the Yi residence came to ask her to return, she would usually find an excuse to return. Although Minister Yi was dissatisfied with his daughter who was obviously out of his control, Yi Li's identity as Princess Ding was there. No matter how dissatisfied he was, he couldn't say or do anything. Actually, under normal circumstances, if the Empress Dowager and the two brothers Mo Jingli wanted to fight for the throne, no matter who it was, they would try to rope in Mo Xiaoyao. However, on one hand, Mo Xiaoyao was a useless person in the eyes of outsiders. On the other hand, Mo Jingqi probably wanted to get rid of the Ding King residence as soon as possible. Therefore, the days in the Ding King residence were still peaceful. No matter which side it was, they didn't expect Mo Xiaoyao to stand on their side. Of course, they also believed that Mo Xiaoyao wouldn't stand on the other side. Princess Consort, Miss Biao asks for an audience. Yi Li put down the needle and thread in her hand. She raised her head and asked curiously, Miss Biao? Yang Qianru? Why did she come to the main courtyard? The Ding King residence was very big, very big. Moreover, there were many places that one couldn't go to just because they wanted to. Therefore, even if there were two people who didn't make people feel comfortable living in the residence, Yi Li wouldn't be able to sense the existence of side consort Yang and Miss Biao under normal circumstances. Because ever since Mo Xiaoyao moved to the main courtyard, the security of this courtyard had obviously been upgraded. Not to mention entering the main courtyard, without permission, they couldn't even get close to the outer courtyard. After being rebuffed twice and being reprimanded by Chief Steward Mo sent by Mo Xiaoyao, side consort Yang didn't try to challenge the new Princess Consort Ding's authority anymore. Mo Xiaoyao had always been good to her. Yi Li could obviously feel it. Not to mention that Mo Xiaoyao had generously given her power when she had just married into the family, he had also clearly expressed his attitude towards her, the princess consort, in front of the servants in the residence. Otherwise, not to mention the Ding King residence, even the servants of an ordinary family wouldn't be so easily tamed by a new daughter-in-law. Therefore, it was very important to have someone to support her. Especially when this person was the person with the highest authority in the residence. This servant doesn't know. However, Miss Biao has already been standing at the entrance of the outer courtyard for quite some time. That's why the guard outside asked someone to inform Prince Consort. Jing who came in to report, said. Because the prince had instructed that outsiders were not allowed to enter the inner courtyard to disturb the princess consort, they would normally ask people to leave. However, Miss Biao, who had been easily dismissed the previous few times, wasn't willing to leave so easily today. The guards couldn't do anything to Miss Biao. After all, she was a guest. They could only ask Jing who was passing by, to come in and report. Prince, what do you think? Yi Li tilted her head and asked Mo Xiaoyao, who was sitting by the half-opened window and reading a book. Mo Xiaoyao didn't even look at her. He flipped a page of the book and said indifferently, "If Miss Li wants to see her, then let her come in. If she doesn't want to see her, then let someone send her back. Or, the Wang residence has another courtyard outside the city. She can accompany side consort Yang there for a few years." TSK. Yi Li clicked her tongue. This man was truly heartless. Even though she hadn't seen Yang Qianru for a long time, but the few times they met, she had looked at him with tactful resentment and tenderness. He could actually say such cold and heartless words. But she liked it. Let her come in. Putting aside the clothes that were almost finished, Yi Li said with some vexation, "Side consort Yang had mentioned to me before about finding a good marriage for Miss Biao, but She had never been a matchmaker before." Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, "Don't trouble yourself. You won't be able to find one." "What do you mean?" What did he mean by she couldn't find one? Mo Xiaoyao said, "This matter was mentioned by Chief Steward Mo 3 years ago. However, neither side consort Yang Qianru nor herself were satisfied with the candidate he proposed. You're not familiar with the capital. I don't think you can find a better candidate than the one Chief Steward Mo listed." Yi Li couldn't help wiping her sweat. So Mo Xiaoyao had also been a matchmaker before. But he had directly asked Chief Steward Mo to do it. She was really stupid to worry about whether she should attend more banquets. Chief Steward Mo's people are too bad. Mo Xiaoyao looked up at her and said, "Chief Steward Mo listed the best candidates that could be found with her qualifications. Moreover, she's already 17. There are even fewer unmarried people around her age. Not everyone was like Mo Xiaoyao, Mo Jingli and Xu Qingchen who were over 20 and still unmarried. Even if they weren't, most people were already engaged. Then what should we do? She couldn't really delay her life like this, right?" And it wasn't that Yi Li was narrow-minded, but she really suspected that if this continued, it would become Mo Xiaoyao's responsibility in the end. If she wants to marry, then let Chief Steward Mo send the list over. If she doesn't want it, then don't worry about it. If she's not married when she's 18, then send her to Wuyue Nunnery to accompany sister-in-law. Yi Li couldn't help but want to shed a tear for the affectionate Miss Yang. What was called being considerate? Just look at Mo Xiaoyao's performance. Chapter 133. A short while later, Yang Qianru was gracefully led in by someone. She was accompanied by 2 young maidservants, and one of them was holding a box of unknown contents in her hands. Seeing Yang Qianru suddenly look at a certain place behind her, Yi Li looked at the unfinished clothes on the side and suddenly had a bad feeling. "Biaomei, please sit." Yi Li nodded to Yang Qianru with a smile. Yang Qianru quickly looked behind Yi Li. She quickly shook her head and said in a low voice, "Many thanks, Wang Fei, no. No need. I'll just stand." Yi Li was speechless. "What do you mean by you'll just stand? You're just a Biaomei living in a Wang Fu. Do you need to act like a mistreated concubine?" She looked at Yang Qianru's moon-white robe with orchid embroidery. Her fresh and exquisite hair had a pearl hairpin in it. Ever since Yi Li had cleaned up Mo Xiaoyao's plain clothes, this girl had finally bid farewell to her white robe fluttering in the wind. But she still walked the path of elegance and nobility. "Biaomei, please sit." Yi Li's voice was slightly deep as she said lightly. Yang Qianru was shocked and her expression clearly became terrified. Under Yi Li's gaze, she carefully sat down with a wronged expression. That wronged appearance made Yi Li feel like a mouthful of blood was stuck in her chest. It was disgusting to spit it out, but it was even more disgusting to swallow it. She didn't bully her. "Biaomei has come to the main yard at this time. Is there something you need?" Yi Li suppressed the displeasure in her heart and asked Yang Qianru. Yang Qianru raised her head and nervously twisted the handkerchief in her hand with a red face. I. Yi Li smiled patiently. Yang Qianru glanced at Mo Xiaoyao. She seemed to have finally gathered her courage and said, Tomorrow is my cousin's birthday. I'm here to give him a birthday gift." Yi Li glanced at the box in the hands of the servant girl behind her. She turned her head to glance at Mo Xiaoyao, who seemed to be engrossed in his book. She smiled and said, "So that's how it is. Thank you for the trouble. May I have a look? Is it inconvenient? In that case, please have a look, Prince." She waved her hand, indicating for the servant girl to bring the box to Mo Xiaoyao. Hearing Yi Li's words, Yang Qianru's eyes lit up. She looked expectantly at the person sitting by the window reading. The little girl had just walked in front of Mo Xiaoyao when the box in her hand was suddenly grabbed by a hand that reached in through the window. It was unknown when Jin had appeared by the window. She held the box with a focused expression and opened it. She reached out to take a look at the thing inside. From Yi Li's direction, she could see that it was a gorgeous snow blue robe. Although she could only see a corner, the embroidery was indeed very exquisite and meticulous. "It's not poisonous. Jin, move aside. You're blocking the light," Mo Xiaoyao said lightly. "Oh," Jin responded. She hugged the box and disappeared through the window. From beginning to end, Mo Xiaoyao did not even see a corner of the robe. Yang Qianru was stunned. She hurriedly asked, "Where did he take it?" Yi Li wondered if she should tell him that the things that Mo Xiaoyao did not want were all taken by Jin to play with. After playing with them, she threw them away. Mo Xiaoyao put down the book in his hand and looked up. Under Yang Qianru's surprised and expectant gaze, he said calmly, "If there's nothing else, go back to your own courtyard. Tomorrow, I will ask Steward Mo to send a list of suitable men for the trial marriage. You can choose one." Yang Qianru's delicate face suddenly turned snow white. Sparkling tears kept falling down. "No, cousin, I don't want to. I don't want to leave the palace. I don't want to get married, don't drive me away." Mo Xiaoyao frowned. He quickly nodded and said, "That's fine. Tomorrow, pack up your things and go to Wuyue Nunnery to accompany sister-in-law. Just like this, send Miss Yang back." Yang Qianru's maids were all maids of the palace. Naturally, they did not dare to disobey Mo Xiaoyao. Even though they knew that their young miss was unwilling, they still went forward to help her leave. "Cousin. Boo-hoo. Don't drive Qianru away. I'll be obedient and won't make cousin angry," Yang Qianru sobbed. She struggled and refused to leave under the support of the two maidservants. "Take her away." Mo Xiaoyao frowned and said calmly. No matter how much Yang Qianru struggled, she was not a match for the two maids who were taller than her. In the end, she was almost dragged out. Yi Li sat on the side and silently looked at Mo Xiaoyao's calm face. Hearing the faint sound of Yang Qianru crying, she could not help but sigh in her heart that this man was really cruel. When an ordinary man saw a beautiful and weak girl crying like that, even if he did not love her, he would still feel some pity. However, Mo Xiaoyao's eyes did not have the slightest emotion. It was as if the girl who was dragged out was not a weak girl, but an object that he did not need anymore. "Li, why are you sighing?" Mo Xiaoyao asked. Yi Li could not help but sigh again and said, "Whoever falls in love with you must have done something wrong in their previous life. Otherwise, they must have owed you some debt in their previous life." Mo Xiaoyao stared at Yi Li's back and asked, "Why do you say that?" Yi Li said, "Does it even need to be said? Just look at Yang Qianru and you will know. Falling in love with someone who did not love, or did not love at all, if that was not a debt in their previous life, then what was it? Was it a tragedy to be born? Then, what kind of person will Li fall in love with?" Mo Xiaoyao asked. Yi Li sat on the needlework in her hand and casually replied, "Love? I don't know, I probably won't fall in love with anyone. No matter how touching love is, it will become family after a long time. Since that is the case, why not live a good life from the beginning? Who could spend their life with sweet words and honeyed words? After a long time, they would only be left with daily necessities. Then is it because Li has not fallen in love with anyone?" Mo Xiaoyao asked in a low voice. Yi Li's needlework paused for a moment, then she quickly moved again and said, "Perhaps." Of course, she had fallen in love before, but to say that her love was unforgettable, she really had not. If Li falls in love with someone, will she live and die with them? Yi Li turned her head and looked at the man who was leaning against the wheelchair with a strange expression. She smiled and said, "Prince, Are you trying to say that if you fall in love with someone, you will live and die with them? Perhaps. I probably won't. Do you think that if I die, I will drag someone down with me? Yi Li thought about it realistically and said, even if it is just ordinary love, you can't do that. Is it a lover or an enemy? Under the sunlight, Mo Xiaoyao seemed to be seriously thinking about it. After a while, he said in a low voice, "You are right. If I die, I still hope that she lives well." After saying this, he no longer paid any attention to Yi Li and picked up the book he had not finished to continue reading. Yi Li did not expect that Mo Xiaoyao, who she had always thought was gentle, indifferent, and somewhat emotionless, would be so gentle. She shrugged in confusion and turned back to continue embroidering. After a while, Mo Xiaoyao's words appeared in her mind again, "If I die, I still hope that she lives well." Chapter 134. Huh! Yi Li was so shocked that the embroidery needle almost poked her finger. Mo Xiaoyao had someone he liked. Yi Li's mood was not good, very bad. Even though she did not understand why it was so bad. In short, she was inexplicably depressed. This kind of situation was very rare in her decades of life. Even when she broke up with her first boyfriend and went on her first mission, she did not seem to be in such a bad mood. So after venting for a while in the martial arts field and finding that her mood did not improve, Yi Li decisively decided to go out to relax. Coincidentally, Hua Tianxiong had sent an invitation to her to admire the lotus flowers in the early summer, so Yi Li did not hesitate to agree. The Chu capital was in the north and there were not many places to admire the lotus flowers. So it was destined that the place to admire the lotus flowers in June and July every year would be filled with tourists. The lotus flowers in the early summer had not fully bloomed and it had already attracted the noble young ladies of the capital to come in droves. When Mo Xiaoyao heard that Yi Li was going out to admire the lotus flowers and did not have the intention to invite him, he did not say much. He only told Yi Li that the Ding King Fu had its own pleasure boat and that Yi Li could invite her friends to go with her. Yi Li had been displeased with Mo Xiaoyao these past 2 days and forgot to ask him if he wanted to go with her. She brought a few servant girls and went out very quickly. Ah Jin silently looked at his prince. The prince clearly wanted to go with the princess. Why didn't he directly tell the princess? On the pleasure boat of the Ding King Fu, Yi Li leisurely leaned against the window in a daze. Hua Tianxiong looked at the decoration of the pleasure boat with admiration and said with envy, "It is worthy of being the Ding King Fu's boat. This decoration is really extraordinary. But Li did Prince Ding specially decorate this boat for you? No one has left the Ding King Fu for many years. This boat is not like the one in the past." Yi Li looked at her lazily and said with a smile, "Your family's boat is not worse than this one. Is there a need to be like this?" Hua Tianxiong rolled her eyes in annoyance. "What do you know? How many people are there in my family? It was so crowded and noisy. You'll be comfortable. It's so quiet to be alone on a boat. Ah, if Prince Ding is also on the ship, then it's two. No, it's better if he's not here. If Prince Ding is here, then I'll be too embarrassed to stay here and freeload." Yi Li looked at the various pleasure boats on the lake not far away and said in confusion, "There are so many boats floating on the lake. Are they looking at lotus flowers or pleasure boats?" Hua Tianxiang giggled and said, "Look at the flowers and admire the people." These few days, the lotus flowers had just bloomed, and the weather was perfect. Of course, there were many people coming out. Do you know how many scholars and beauties get married every year on this beauty lake? Beauty Lake. Yi Li glances at the vast lake. After seeing West Lake, Taihu Lake, Qiandao Lake and so on, this small beauty lake seems to have nothing to do with beauties. Hua Tianxiong shook her head helplessly. "Aren't you a little too unromantic? Don't you know why Zheng didn't come with us today? Please enlighten me." "Because she's with second young Master Shu today." Hua Tianxiong gritted her teeth and glanced at Yi Li. "Speaking of which, I found it strange that you came alone today. I thought you would come with Prince Ding. I was planning to go and play with Murong." Yi Li glared daggers at her. "Then who was the one who invited me to come out? I was afraid you wouldn't know, so I gave you a reminder. Who told you to hide at home all year round and refuse to go out?" Hua Tian Xiong muttered in dissatisfaction. Then she looked at the newly decorated decorations on the boat and said with a guilty conscience, "You have to remember, it's Prince's birthday in a few days. You must ask him to come out and admire the lotus flowers. I'm sure he prepared this boat to admire the flowers with you. Maybe Prince Ding is thinking of how to kill me without leaving a trace." Yi Li was stunned. Looking at Hua Tian Xiong's worried face, she couldn't help but smile. "You're thinking too much. Tian Xiong, Li Li. Today's weather was very good. Whether it was on the lake or the lakeside, there were songs and laughter, but no one else would shout so loudly except for Murongting." Yi Li and Hua Tian Xiong came out of the cabin and saw Murongting standing outside another boat, shouting and waving at them. There was also a handsome young man beside her, who seemed to be saying something to Murongting. However, Murongting was obviously impatient and didn't want to pay attention to him. Hua Tian Xiong followed behind Yi Li and whispered with a smile, "That's the second young master of the Lung family, Lung Haoyu." "Murong's fiancé?" Yi Li asked. "Yes. Ting didn't like him since she was young, but he liked to stick to Ting since she was young. Later, Ting followed her father to the border. I didn't expect that he still liked to deliberately make her angry after coming back," Hua Tian Xiong said with a smile. Obviously, her impression of Lung Haoyu wasn't too bad. On the other side of the boat, the two people had already started to fight because Murongting wanted to use Qinggong to come to their side, but Lung Haoyu obviously refused. The two pulled and pulled on the deck, and Murongting became angry and started to fight. In addition to them, there were also many other boats around. When they saw the commotion, they also came over. There were obviously many people who knew Murongting and Lung Haoyu, and they all joined in the commotion. Hua Tian Xiong smiled and said, "How long do you think Lung Haoyu can last this time?" Yi Li watched for a while before saying, "Murongting can't beat Lung Haoyu at all. Lung Haoyu seemed to be fighting a lot, but his feet were much more stable than Murongting's." There was a playful smile on his handsome face, but his eyes were absolutely serious when he looked at Murongting. "You said he was letting Ting win?" Yi Li smiled and said, "General Murong loves his daughter as much as his life. Do you think he will really marry Ting to an ignorant and incompetent playboy?" This. Hua Tian Xiong pondered. She really didn't think about this problem seriously. After watching enough, Yi Li smiled and said, "Let them row the boat away. I won't play with Murong today." Hua Tian Xiong pulled her back. "Don't. Believe it or not, if you make Ting angry, even if we row the boat away, she will still dare to jump into the water." Yi Li thought about Murongting's temper. It was really possible. She could only smile and say to the boat over there, "Second young master Leng, Murong, can you come over for a chat?" Murongting stopped, turned back and shouted, "Li, I am your friend. Why are you asking him to come?" Hua Tian Xiong smiled and said, "Then are you coming or not? If you don't come, we will row the boat away." Murongting glared fiercely at Lung Haoyu, opened his hand, then stepped on his foot fiercely, flew away, and landed on Yi Li's boat. Lung Haoyu smiled bitterly. He cupped his hands and said to Yi Li with a smile, "Thank you, princess." He also got up and left his boat and landed on Yi Li's boat. Yi Li instructed the boatman to row the boat away, then turned around and invited the two to go in together. The four people sat down. Qing Luan and others served new tea and snacks before leaving. Murongting sat beside Yi Li and ate snacks while glaring at Lung Haoyu, who followed her. Lung Haoyu only pretended not to see the daggers flying at him. He smiled at Yi Li and said, "The weather is quite good today. Why don't I see the prince and princess traveling together?" Chapter 135. Yi Li raised her eyebrows, looked at Lung Haoyu and asked with a smile, "Second young master Lung is familiar with our prince?" The teacup in Lung Haoyu's hand paused slightly, and he said with a smile, "I'm just a playboy, how could I have the chance to be familiar with Prince?" Murongting snorted and mocked, "You still know that you're a playboy." Ting Lung Haoyu looked at her aggrievedly, "What's wrong with being a playboy? There's food to eat and play, and I can accompany you every day. It's so good to have Big Brother to worry about the family matters." Bah! Murongting almost wanted to jump up, This girl hates good-for-nothing playboys the most. You stay away from this girl in the future. Otherwise, this girl will beat you up every time I see you. Now you also beat me up every time you see me. Lung Haoyu murmured in a low voice, but his voice was just loud enough for everyone in the cabin to hear. Yi Li and Hua Tianxiang couldn't help but cover their mouths and snicker. Murongting was so angry that her face turned red, and she couldn't wait to stab this bastard who embarrassed her to death. Lung Haoyu seemed to be very afraid of Murongting, and he just kept begging for mercy. However, looking at the faint and doting smile in his eyes, one could tell that he was actually playing with Murongting. Yi Li and Hua Tianxiang looked at Murongting, who was still angry, and looked at each other with a smile. Indeed, the onlooker sees more clearly than the person involved in the situation. As Murongting's friends, they naturally hoped that Murongting could be happy in the future, but it was still Murongting's own choice. Princess, the Li Palace's ship is in front. As the four were talking, Qing Xia came in to report. Hua Tianxiang frowned and said, Li why did we meet Li Wang again? Yi Li said with a smile, who told you not to pick a good day? Or it can be said that the capital is really not big. Murongting pursed her lips and said, I think it's a small world. Before Yi Li could speak, Qing Luan also came in and said with a face full of displeasure, Princess, Li Wang and Princess Li request to see you. Let them in. Yi Li sighed. Not long after, Mo Jingli walked in with Yi Li. However, the people following Mo Jingli made Yi Li frown. The woman by King Li's side was different from her usual self. She was dressed in a light yellow robe with some makeup on her face and a veil covering her face. But from Yi Li's point of view, such embellishments were meaningless. No matter who it was, as long as they saw her, they would be able to recognize that this was Princess Xixia of Nanzhao. It had only been a few days. Was Mo Jingli trying to provoke his brother emperor? The palace hadn't announced Princess Xixia's death yet. Greetings, Prince Li and Princess Li. Hua Tianxiang and the others stood up to greet them. Mo Jingli glanced at the people in the cabin, and finally turned his gaze from Yi Li to Lung Haoyu. He said in a deep voice, Lung Haoyu? Lung Haoyu smiled and said, Prince actually recognizes me. It is truly an honor. Of course Mo Jingli knew of Lung Haoyu's reputation. Looking at Murongting beside him, his expression relaxed slightly. He gave a light snort and said to Yi Li, why didn't Mo Xiaoyao come out with you? What does it have to do with King Li? Yi Li's heart was stifled. Hearing Mo Jingli's impolite tone, she immediately retorted without hesitation. As expected, Mo Jingli's expression immediately darkened. He said angrily, woman who doesn't know what's good for her. Yi Li rolled her eyes in her heart, too lazy to pay attention to him. Lung Haoyu looked at Princess Xixia behind Mo Jingli with great interest and said with a smile, Prince, this beauty is. His back was pinched by Murongting. His fake smile immediately turned into a funny grimace. Mo Jingli coldly stared at him and said, didn't your big brother teach you not to ask what you shouldn't ask? Lung Haoyu shrugged indifferently and said, my big brother is very busy. Where would he have the time to teach me this? Yi Li rubbed her eyebrows and said indifferently, Prince Li, fourth sister, sit down and talk. Murongting snorted and said, I don't want to sit with some people. Li, Tianxiang and I will go out and take a look first. Finished speaking, she gave Mo Jingli a sidelong glance and pulled Hua Tianxiang to leave. Her appearance was just short of saying that this lady didn't want to sit with him. Hua Tianxiang gave Yi Li an apologetic look and let Murongting pull her out. She also didn't want to get along with Prince Li. Lung Haoyu saw Murongting run out, then looked at Yi Li and Mo Jingli with hesitation in his eyes. Yi Li smiled and said, young Master Lung should go and watch Murongting. Don't let her run around with Tianxiang. Lung Haoyu nodded and walked out. Not long after, Qing Luan and the others came in with tea and snacks, but they didn't go out after putting them down. They each stood respectfully in the cabin, waiting for the princess's orders. Understanding their thoughts, Yi Li laughed secretly in her heart but didn't say anything. You all go out first. I have something to say to her. Mo Jingli ordered. Yi Ying bit her lips and got up silently and left. Princess Xixia looked at Yi Li with hostility and didn't say anything. She followed Yi Ying and left. But Qing Luan and the others were not so obedient. They still stood in a corner and looked at each other with concern, as if they didn't hear Mo Jingli's words. Mo Jingli said in a deep voice, "I told you to go out, didn't you hear?" Qing Shuang replied in a clear and loud voice, replying to Prince Li, "We heard. But our prince said to protect the princess's safety, so we naturally have to obey the prince's orders." Mo Jingli's eyes flashed with a cold light. He stared at Qing Shuang coldly and said, "You mean I will harm her?" Qing Shuang said, "We don't know. We are just in case. Prince, please forgive us." Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "Prince Li, there doesn't seem to be anything between us. They are all people I trust. If you have something to say, you can say it directly." Mo Jingli was silent. His eyes stared at Yi Li without blinking. Yi Li didn't say anything and let him stare. After a long time, Mo Jingli said coldly, "Yi Li, you lied to I." Yi Li was stunned. Lied to him? Where did this come from? Or did Mo Jingli find out what she lied to him again? "Prince, where did this come from? Slandering concubine I for no reason is not a good habit." Yi Li said faintly. Mo Jingli snorted and said, "You deliberately pretended to be so useless just to make I break the engagement first, right? You have already hooked up with Mo Xiaoyao, right?" Yi Li calmly held the teacup in her hand. She restrained herself from splashing the tea on the man's face. "Prince, I already told you. Fantasizing too much is an illness, you should treat it as soon as possible. Prince, just because you have a despicable personality doesn't mean other people have bad personalities." She wasn't satisfied with the marriage, but to say that she had hooked up with Mo Xiaoyao a long time ago. They were still as innocent as tofu with spring onions. Mo Jingli's face turned dark, but he didn't get angry like he usually did. Instead, he stared at Yi Li for a while and then revealed a malicious smile. Yi Li stared at him expressionlessly, but her heart was on guard. Mo Jingli lowered his voice and said to Yi Li with a smile, "Yi Li, you haven't consummated with Mo Xiaoyao yet, right? It can't be that. Mo Xiaoyao has really become a cripple, right? If it's like this, I can barely." Chapter 136. Bang! Before Mo Jingli could finish speaking, a fist hit his nose accurately and fiercely. 2 tubes of blood immediately dripped down. Mo Jingli widened his eyes in shock. Before he could recover, Yi Li had already stood up and slammed his head on the table. Damn Yi Li! The pain on his forehead finally made Mo Jingli recover from the shock of being attacked by Yi Li again. "I won't let you go." Yi Li gave Qing Luan a look to stop her from making a move, and a sneer appeared on her lips. Seeing Mo Jingli pouncing on her, she got up and rolled back to dodge. When Mo Jingli pounced on her again, she was already by another window. After failing to catch her twice, and thinking of how he was attacked twice, Mo Jingli also guessed that Yi Li was not a weak woman. This time, he used his martial arts and pounced on her fiercely, vowing to catch this woman who teased him. However, when Yi Li lowered her body, Mo Jingli felt a sharp pain under his armpit. He could not react in time and hit the window of the cabin. "Someone come quickly." Li Wang fell into the water. A shrill scream suddenly came from the originally joyful and leisurely Beauty Lake. The people on the pleasure boat not far away were dumbfounded when they saw a tall figure fall out of a wide and gorgeous pleasure boat, and then fell straight into the lake with a plop. When they reacted to the content of the scream just now, everyone was shocked. Li Wang fell into the water. The nearby pleasure boats came over one after another. Those who had a grudge with Li Wang found a place to watch the show. Those who had a relationship with Li Wang quickly ordered their servants to jump down to save him. With such a big commotion, the people outside the cabin naturally heard it. Murong Ting and Leng Haoyu rushed in first. Li, are you okay?" Murong Ting pulled Yi Li and looked at her nervously. After confirming that Yi Li was fine, she sighed in relief and said with dissatisfaction, "What's wrong with this Li Wang? Ah Li, did he bully you?" Yi Li's voice was filled with fear as she smiled and said, "I'm fine. It's Prince Li. I don't know how he fell into the lake." "Prince?" Yi Ying and Princess Xixia were shocked and quickly rushed to the window to look. Many people had already gone down to the lake to save people, but they did not see Mo Jingli's figure yet. Yi said anxiously, "How did Prince fall into the lake?" He doesn't know how to swim. Third sister. This time, Yi Ying did not suspect Yi Li. After all, Mo Jingli was still a man who was good at both civil and martial arts in Yi Ying's heart. No matter what, it was impossible for him to be silently thrown into the water by Yi Li. Yi Li did not care about comforting her frightened sister at this time. It's okay. So many people went down to save Li Wang. He will definitely be fine. Yi Ying stared at the people in the lake with tears in her eyes without blinking. She did not care to say anything to Yi Li. However, Princess Xixia looked at the people in the cabin and turned to walk out. Yi Li said lightly, "Miss, where are you going?" I'm going to save Prince." "It's none of your business." Princess Xixia obviously knew that Yi Li recognized her. Thinking about how Yi Li had seen her in such a sorry state, Princess Xixia felt uncomfortable looking at Yi Li. She did not want to stay in the same cabin as her. Yi Li pulled Yi Ying and said, "Fourth sister, take this miss back to your ship. Since this miss is Li Wang's person, as Li Wang Fei, you should take good care of the guest. Don't let anything happen to her." But Yi Ying hesitated. She hated Princess Xixia. What's more, Li Wang's life and death were unknown. How could she be in the mood to care about this? "All right, don't forget your identity." Yi Li frowned. "Li Wang will be fine. Don't mess things up." After persuading Yi Ying to leave, Yi Li smiled at the other three people. She sat down leisurely and watched the salvage work below. After a while, Li Wang was finally rescued from the water. Under the sunlight, one could clearly see that Mo Jingli's usually cold face had a large bruise on his forehead. It was probably because he had stayed in the water for too long. His nose did not look bad for the time being. Everyone hurriedly sent him to the Li Wang Fu's ship that was parked not far away. The onlookers gradually gathered around. Yi Li's side was much quieter. Leng Haoyu looked thoughtfully at Yi Li, who was leisurely leaning against the window, and said, "Is Wang Fei not worried at all?" Yi Li smiled faintly. "What's there to worry about?" "Young Master Leng, don't worry. Li Wang is very lucky. Nothing will happen to him." Young Master Leng also saw it just now. "He's still alive, isn't he?" Murongting held her chin and asked curiously, "Why would Li Wang fall into the lake for no reason?" Every year during the golden period of the lake tour, there would always be one or two people who fell into the lake. However, they were usually insensible children or weak young ladies. Li Wang was a man who had practiced martial arts since he was young. How could he fall into the lake? Yi Li replied with a serious expression, "People make mistakes and horses stumble." Li Wang suddenly stood up. It was probably because the ship was unstable that he fell in. Had the ship ever been unstable? Murongting, who had been standing outside, was puzzled. His qinggong should be good. Li Wang is afraid of water. He probably forgot. Yi Li replied without changing her expression. Qinggong was not omnipotent, especially when one's legs suddenly went numb. Unless he had someone's ability to fly without using his legs. However, it would probably not be so easy to mess with Mo Jingli next time. Yi Li silently thought in her heart that she must be careful when she saw Mo Jingli in the future. Hua Tianxiong was not interested in how Mo Jingli fell. She said with some worry, Li Wang had an accident on your ship. The Empress Dowager and Xian Zhao Dowager." Yi Li blinked innocently. "It's normal for the ship to be unstable. Li Wang drank wine and did not stabilize the ship properly. Do I have to take responsibility? Well, it seems to be my fault for not closing the window properly." Leng Haoyu's gaze swept to the only two open windows in the cabin. He said with a smile, "Although it's only the beginning of summer, the lake is still a little hot. I think everyone can understand why the princess forgot to close the window. Thank you, second young Master Leng, for your understanding." Yi Li smiled. Hua Tianxiong shook her head. "Li, we are fine. However, Li Wang has always been at odds with Prince Ding. He also has a grudge with you. You'd better be careful." Yi Li smiled and said, "Thank you, Tianxiong. I'll be careful." If Mo Jingli really had the nerve to tell everyone that he was beaten by a woman, then she would not mind arguing with him. She would not rashly make a move without careful consideration. Thinking of Mo Jingli's miserable face just now, Yi Li suddenly felt that her fist was a little itchy. She secretly regretted that she did not punch him a few more times. Li Wang's mansion. Mo Jingli was awakened by the sound of sobbing. His entire body was in an indescribable discomfort, and Shifu's cries made him feel as though his brain had exploded. Shut up. Prince, you are finally awake. Yi Ying rushed over in surprise. Princess Xixia also hurriedly squeezed over. Brother Jingli, how are you? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Chapter 137. Mo Jingli closed his eyes and finally remembered what happened to him. A breath was stuck in his chest and he couldn't let it out. Another earth-shattering cough came. Yi Ying hurriedly supported Mo Jingli to help him breathe. Prince, are you feeling better? Looking at Yi Ying's tear-stained face and thinking of a certain hateful woman's cold and emotionless face, Mo Jingli felt a wave of annoyance. Don't cry, I haven't died yet. Where's Yi Li? Princess Xixia lightly snorted and said, Brother Jingli, what are you talking about? Yi Li naturally went back to her Prince Ding mansion. Something happened to you on her bed and she didn't even come to take a look. So rude. Yi Ying glared at Princess Xixia. Third sister is much more polite than some people. Men and women are different. The prince is on the sickbed, why would third sister come to see him? Yi Ying wasn't stupid. Even her father couldn't stop Princess Xixia from entering the Li Palace. Although Yi Li didn't get along with her since they were young, she also had a grudge against Princess Xixia. Compared to Princess Xixia, she would definitely stand on her younger sister's side. Yi Ying remembered how Yi Li reminded her to watch Princess Xixia and not let her run around outside. After she came back, even the old concubine, who had always been picky about her, made an exception and praised her. Yi Ying felt that sometimes it was right to listen to her third sister. After all, no matter how smart or powerful second sister was, she was in the palace and couldn't help her. Grandmother was right. After they got married, they should support each other. Princess Xixia was furious. That incident was destined to make her unable to raise her head among the noblewomen in the capital. She would even lose her identity as the Princess of Nanjiao. Although she could put everything down and return to Nanjiao, even if she wasn't Princess Xixia, she would still be the high and mighty Princess of Nanjiao. But she really loved Brother Jingli. Even if she didn't have the identity of a princess, she would always be with Brother Jingli. Brother Jingli, look at her, enough. Xixia, Ying'er, you guys go out first. I'm tired. Mo Jingli said impatiently. Although the two girls were usually not easy to deal with, they were still obedient to Mo Jingli's words. Seeing that his face had darkened, she could only silently get up and leave with a face full of reluctance. The room was quiet for a while before consort Xian Zhao walked in. Mo Jingli hurriedly wanted to get up, but Xian Zhao dowager consort was one step ahead of him and pressed his shoulder to sit down by the bed. She frowned and said, How could you be so careless? Mo Jingli said in a low voice, This child has made Mu Fei worry. Xian Zhao dowager consort still stared at him and asked, How could you fall into the water without any reason? She was still on the boat of the Prince Ding mansion. How many times has Lady Mother told you not to provoke that Yi Li? Tell Mu Fei, was it Yi Li who caused you to fall into the lake? Mo Jingli's face darkened. After a moment of silence, he said, I accidentally fell down. Accidentally? What time is it now and you're still not careful? Xian Zhao dowager consort reprimanded in dissatisfaction. Mu Fei won't ask you what happened this time. But, from now on, stay away from the people of the Prince Ding mansion. You're also not allowed to provoke Prince Ding, do you understand? Mo Jingli disdainfully raised his eyebrows and said, Mu Fei, you and Muhu are placing too much importance on Mo Xiaoyao. Looking at his disdainful expression, Xian Zhao dowager consort sighed and said, You've been fighting with Prince Ding since you were young. Mu Fei knows that you don't put him in your eyes. But you have to remember clearly, you can ignore Mo Xiaoyao, but you definitely can't ignore the Ding King's residence. Ding Mansion and Shu family, we can't rope them in or offend them. So, Mu Fei will not ask about today's matter. Even if you really suffered a loss, you have to swallow it for me. Mo Jingli was silent for a moment and said in a deep voice, I've made Mu Fei worry. This child knows. Xianzhao Dowager Consort nodded and looked at Mo Jingli and said softly, Mu Fei knows that you're a good child. Sometimes, you can't do everything according to your own preferences. When you get everything, won't it be up to you to decide what you want to do? Before that happens, you have to be patient. Many thanks for Mu Fei's teachings. This child understands. Mo Jingli respectfully nodded. The clothes that Yi Li spent a lot of time making were given to Mo Xiaoyao as a gift on his birthday. Of course, due to her bad impression of Beauty's Lake and the fact that Mo Xiaoyao might have another sweetheart, Yi Li did not accept Hua Tianxiang's suggestion to invite Mo Xiaoyao to tour the lake. Although she was more curious about where Mo Xiaoyao found a sweetheart who didn't leave the house all year round. Since he had a sweetheart, why did he marry her? Or did he have a sweetheart after marrying her? No matter which thought it was, it made her very unhappy. Because she didn't know which was more unlucky than being married in as a shield or having her husband cheat on her less than a month after marriage. Therefore, all the servants in the Prince Ding mansion didn't understand why the relationship between their prince and princess seemed to slowly return to the situation of the first few days of their marriage. It should be said that Princess was distancing herself from the prince. Did they have a fight? But looking at how the two were still interacting calmly, it didn't seem like they had a fight. Mo Xiaoyao naturally knew that Yi Li was unobtrusively distancing herself from him. It shouldn't be said that she was distancing herself. She was unobtrusively returning their relationship to its initial state. But it clearly wasn't very successful. Because not only did Mo Xiaoyao discover it, even Yi Li's mama and the usually busy Sun Mama discovered it. But Mo Xiaoyao couldn't figure out the reason for this. It seemed that it started from the afternoon when young Qianru came to send the birthday gift. Alone in the study, Mo Xiaoyao silently pondered. He didn't think that Yi Li was angry because of young Qianru. Not only did they know that young Qianru was nothing, but with Yi Li's personality, she wouldn't be angry because of such a woman. Then, it was because of their conversation. Mo Xiaoyao held the book but didn't read it. Instead, he silently recalled every word of the conversation that day. When Mo Xiaoyao was lost in thought in the study, Yi Li had already changed into men's clothes with Qing Luan and Qing Shuang and left the Fu. Princess Ding's identity was destined to attract attention wherever she went, so Yi Li couldn't help but learn how to disguise herself. Fortunately, Yi Li's disguise was very good. Of course, it wasn't the kind of human skin mask. She just slightly modified the skin color, eyebrows, and other details such as the Adam's apple and ear holes. Then, a handsome youth with a slightly dull complexion came out. In addition, Yi Li's temperament was different from the women of this era. If not familiar people, it would be difficult to recognize her if they didn't look carefully. Thus, under the surprised expressions of Qing Luan and Qing Xia, Yi Li was satisfied and left the two of them in the treasure pavilion to settle the score. Waving a folding fan that she casually grabbed, she swaggered out the door. The two shadow guards who followed Yi Li secretly worried for their prince. What kind of princess did the prince marry? If they didn't stare at the room that the princess went in and saw the handsome youth come out, they wouldn't dare to leave. In order to be careful, they went in to take a look. They almost lost the princess. They were the most senior shadow guards in the Ding King's residence. If they lost the princess, how could they still have the face to stay in the shadow guard? They would directly return to the barracks and train. But, looking at the elegant young master walking leisurely in front. San, does he look like a woman? Chapter 138. She couldn't tell at all, Xiao Sai. Ever since she was able to practice martial arts without any restrictions, Yi Li felt that she didn't like her previous life more and more. After all, she was still pretending. She never had the temperament of a noble lady. Of course, she definitely wasn't lively and active. But she still needed to satisfy the normal human preferences for entertainment and leisure. As for Mo Xiaoyao's problem, she threw it to the back of her mind after thinking about it for 2 or 3 days. If Mo Xiaoyao really had a sweetheart and decided to peacefully break up with her, she could accept it. In any case, she had money. She believed that Mo Xiaoyao wouldn't be stingy about the issue of alimony. But in this way, the matter of cultivating feelings and having children in the future would have to be put aside. She didn't have the hobby of having children with other people when she knew that they already had someone else in their heart. Therefore, Yi Li, who thought that she didn't need to cultivate feelings, decided to go out more when she had more free time. A married woman didn't need to be locked up at home every day. "Ah San, where is Wang Fei going?" In the dark, Shadow Guard 4, who was silently following her, asked in a low voice. "How would I know? Wang Fei seems to want to leave the city." Shadow Guard 3 replied. "The prince and Wang Fei seem to be at odds. Wang Fei isn't planning to run away from home, right?" Shadow Guard 4 suddenly remembered that when they changed shifts yesterday, 1 and 2 seemed to have mentioned that the relationship between the prince and Wang Fei was a bit strange these days. "This shouldn't be." Shadow Guard 3 hesitated. "How about I follow Wang Fei and you go back and report to the prince? If Wang Fei really leaves home, can you stop her? What if you lose her?" Although they hadn't personally tested Wang Fei's strength, it was definitely different from those flowery martial arts. "This already lost her," Shadow Guard 3 exclaimed. They had just left the city. How did Wang Fei disappear? Was it because they were too absorbed in their conversation? "What are you talking about? Hurry up and find her." 2 shadow guards came out from the shadows and looked around for the princess's whereabouts. Although they didn't dare to get too close, they weren't too far away either. Wang Fei couldn't have gone too far in such a short time. Yi Li sat on the tree trunk and looked at the 2 shadow guards chattering below. They were good at hiding their tracks, but their personalities were a little off the charts. "Hey, don't you ever look up?" The 2 shadow guards passing by looked at the handsome young man sitting on the tree with embarrassed faces. That was because there had never been a princess consort who knew how to climb trees in the Prince Ding mansion. "Also, we walked around the tree for a long time, but we didn't even hear a breath." Princess consort. The 2 shadow guards wept silently. They had already decided that they would report to the commander when they returned today. They were not fit to be shadow guards. They had to train themselves from scratch. Yi Li nimbly jumped down from the tree and landed in front of them. "Thank you for your hard work. Your subordinate doesn't dare. I didn't plan on running away from home." Yi Li smiled as she looked at the 2 shadow guards with nervous expressions. The Shadow Guard 3 released a breath and carefully asked, "Then, Wang Fei, why did you leave the city?" "I just wanted to see how long you could follow me." Yi Li smiled slightly and nodded in praise. "Overall, it's not bad. But if I could control your eyes, it would be better. I just came out of the treasure storage pavilion and your eyes made it impossible for me to pretend I didn't know. Many thanks for Wang Fei's teachings." They had been discovered in less than a li was this praise. Yi Li looked happily at the depressed shadow guards in front of her and said, "You can follow me, but you won't tell anyone else what I do every day, right?" The 2 shadow guards were overjoyed. "Many thanks, Wang Fei. Ever since the first day of the prince and Wang Fei's wedding, the 2 of us and the other 2 have been Wang Fei's shadow guards. Unless Wang Fei's life is in danger, we won't reveal anything about Wang Fei to anyone else, including the prince," Shadow Guard 4 explained. Yi Li nodded. Mo Xiaoyao had told her about the shadow guards in the Ding Wang Fu. She had confirmed in these days that these people had not told anything about her to Mo Xiaoyao. But it didn't matter if they said it because what she would let them see was not a secret. "Perfect, this young master needs a few coolies. Come with me." Shadow Guard 4 looked at each other. They had said that they were shadow guards, right? On this day, the title of Princess Consort of Dingwa finally transcended the word woman. Wang Fei knew how to ride a horse. That was nothing. Most of the women in Xiling and the northern tribes knew how to ride a horse. Wang Fei knew martial arts. That was also nothing. They already knew about it in the Fu. But who could tell them why Wang Fei would bring 2 people to charge into the bandit stronghold? Alright, there were no bandits here now. The night that Wang Fei had been kidnapped, Feng Sangongzi had led the Black Cloud Cavalry to clean up this bandit stronghold called Black Cloud Peak. The brothers of the Black Cloud Cavalry were very depressed. The blind bandits dared to call it Black Cloud Peak and dared to provoke the prince. Wasn't this smearing the name of the Black Cloud Cavalry? They watched as Yi Li rode a horse over 100 li and then walked up the mountain. She didn't look tired at all. Shadow Guard 3 and 4, who had become Light Guard, were very depressed. Yi Li turned back and looked at the two in confusion. She raised an eyebrow. Why aren't you walking? Tired? The two shook their heads like rattles. Shadow Guard 3 gathered his courage to ask, Wang Fei, what are we doing here? Yi Li turned back and smiled at the two, climbing the mountain, taking a walk, going on an outing, relaxing. Killing you two to sell? Wang Fei, Shadow Guard 3 and 4 had been to Black Cloud Peak before, but when they went up the mountain, they found that this place was completely different from the last time they came. The original stronghold on the mountain was not damaged. Instead, the traps that had been set to go up the mountain had been removed. The path up the mountain was much easier. Even though this wasn't much for people with strong martial arts like them, it was a big difference for normal people. And there were people living in the stronghold. They could see the smoke from cooking in the distance. Wang Fei didn't want to become a bandit, right? Or was there another group of bandits in Black Cloud Peak and Wang Fei wanted to bring the two of them to suppress the bandits? The three had just approached the stronghold when there was the sound of dogs barking. A while later, a spirited old man in his 60s came forward with a few elders and children. When he saw Yi Li, he came forward with a smile. Chu Gongzi. Yi Li nodded. Elder Wang, how about coming in? The old man leaned on his walking stick and nodded, saying, This old man is very well. It is all thanks to Gongzi's care. Gongzi, please come in. Yi Li invited the old man to go first. Walking in front of the old man, she asked as she walked, I can't come here often. Is Elder Wang happy here? The old man said, This place is not far from the capital. Everything is good. We've been carrying out young master's orders according to young master. Does Gongzi want to go take a look first? It is almost time for lunch. Gongzi must have not eaten since you came from so far away. If you don't mind the shabby conditions in the stronghold, why don't you eat first? Yi Li had come out in the morning and had not eaten lunch. She nodded in agreement. The old man happily ordered people to prepare lunch and personally invited Yi Li to a simple but clean room to rest. Chapter 139. Wang Fei, why is this place? When the old man left, Shadow Guard 3 couldn't wait to ask, but he couldn't figure out what to ask. Yi Li sat leisurely in the chair and said, You want to ask about this place? After I came here last time, I felt that this place was very good. So I thought of a way to buy it. This place was not far from Jing, and it was not a desolate place. These mountains and forests naturally had owners, but because of the bandits, normal people did not dare to care. Shadow Guard 4 said in puzzlement, Why does Wang Fei want to buy this mountain? This place doesn't have any value. No matter if it was the trees or the plants on the mountain, they did not have high value. Also, this mountain did not look like it had any gold or silver mines. Yi Li blinked her eyes. I didn't plan to have any additional value in the first place. This is just an ordinary mountain. It's just a farm and a few more families at the foot of the mountain. Foot of the mountain? Shadow Guard 3 remembered that there was a large farm not far from the foot of the mountain. The Shadow Guards were not idiots. They knew that even if the farm at the foot of the mountain was Wang Fei's, Wang Fei still cared about something on the mountain. Otherwise, she would not have specially climbed up the mountain. Two pairs of eyes silently looked at the handsome youth in front of them. Yi Li helplessly closed the fan she was pretending to be elegant and said, All right, I'll take you to see it after lunch. I don't believe that you know how to follow the work ethic of the Shadow Guard. If you don't know, this master will personally teach you until you understand. Shadow Guard 3 couldn't help but shiver and instinctively replied, This subordinate understands. After eating a simple lunch, Yi Li thanked the old man and took the two Shadow Guards to the back of the mountain. Not long after, Shadow Guard 3 and 4 finally understood why Wang Fei had told them that she needed manual labor. Climbing down the cliff of the back of the mountain, there was a very large valley. The valley was filled with tall trees. Even though it was daytime, They could hear the howls of wolves in the distance. How could there be a place like this near Jing? Yi Li led them around the gloomy forest for a while, and finally found a group of people who were busy. These people were busy building some simple and crude houses, as well as some things that they had seen in the manor's martial arts field and many more things that they did not understand. What puzzled them the most was that they had been following Wang Fei for the past few days, but they had not seen Wang Fei do anything at all. What was going on here? The person who came forward to greet them was a burly man in his 30s. When he saw Yi Li, he immediately came forward to greet her. Master Chu. Yi Li nodded and said, "How's it going?" The burly man's face was full of a straightforward smile as he said, "Young master, don't worry. We won't dare to make a single mistake. Everything was done according to your instructions. What do you think?" Yi Li nodded with satisfaction and said with a smile, "I've already seen it." "You've done very well." The burly man scratched his head and said with a smile, "Even though we don't know what these things are for, Master Chu has been kind to us and has given us work to do. We will definitely do well for you." Yi Li smiled and said, "No need to be polite. You're also earning money with your own strength. Today, I've brought new blueprints. Take a look and see if there's anything you don't understand. You can talk about it in detail." Yi Li took out a thick stack of blueprints and handed it to him. The burly man opened it and looked over it. He said with a smile, "Young master has drawn it well. I'll take it to the masters to see. Does young master want to go together? I'll take a look first. I'll go after they're done." That man took the blueprints and left in high spirits. Yi Li looked at the two people with dull expressions and said, "You can ask what you want to ask." And Sai looked around and said, "Princess. Is Princess building a martial arts field?" There were a lot of things that were similar to the Fu. Yi Li nodded with satisfaction and said with a smile, "You have good eyes. You can say that I'm building a fun game field. Princess, your hobbies are really special. How did Princess find this place?" And San asked. "I asked someone if there were any hidden and fun places near the capital. He recommended this place. I've been here once and felt that it was a pretty good place." And San frowned. He looked up and said, "It's easy for people to break in here, right? They had just come down from the cliff. And last time, the Tiani Pavilion master had escaped from below. This meant that there was more than one way in and out." Yi Li said with a smile, "If you're talking about the way out from below, I've already blocked it. If you want to go out or come in from this forest, I've already checked. The edge of this forest is 50 li or even farther. There's an even deeper cliff below. And there are swamps in the forest, all kinds of poisonous plants, birds, and beasts. Don't you see the snake repellent everywhere around here? It was simply a hunting ground blessed by the heavens. It really isn't easy to find a place like this near the capital. If you plan on coming down from above like we did, when this place is fixed, the way up will also disappear. And, if you're not afraid of death, you can try using Qinggong to jump down." And San and Ansai unconsciously leaned closer to the other. Hearing Princess's tone, the consequences of jumping down from above might be more serious than charging in from the forest. Princess building a place like this, for what? And San swallowed and asked with some difficulty. Yi Li smiled and said, "Didn't I say it already? It's just for fun. The conditions in the Fu are limited, it's too boring. After it's fixed, you can come here and stroll around when you feel bored. Your mood will definitely be better." And San and Ansai's faces were filled with terror. They should have known that Princess with such special interests was definitely not a normal person. Everyone in the capital had been deceived by Princess. Even if the old prince came back to life, he would also be scared by such a fierce wife, right? Looking at the surrounding layout with satisfaction, Yi Li's smiling eyes dimmed. The days wouldn't be so peaceful forever, so she couldn't really act as if she didn't know anything and be a carefree princess consort of Dingwa. Eldest brother went to Nanjiang, third brother went to the military camp. If it wasn't for the unavoidable crisis in the future, eldest uncle wouldn't let eldest brother meddle in the affairs of the court. Qing Chen Gong's reputation was too great, and the Shu family didn't need any more reputation. Then, before things happened, she had to make her own preparations, so that she could protect her family in the future, in her own way. Ansan told their partner Ansan with Yi Li's permission about what happened at Black Cloud Peak. Yi Li didn't mention whether or not they could tell Mo Xiaoyao about this. But after Shadow Guard 1, 2, 3, 4 considered the issue of professional ethics that Princess Consort mentioned, they decided to be a Shadow Guard that abided by professional ethics. It had to be known that being abandoned by their master was the disgrace of being a Shadow Guard. From the moment they became the Shadow Guard for the Princess Consort, their first and only loyalty was to the Princess Consort, not to the prince. Yi Li was very satisfied with these Shadow Guard with professional ethics. After all, it wasn't easy to find people with such strong martial arts, outstanding abilities, and trustworthy people. She also didn't want to waste time finding more guards. Chapter 140. Yi Li contentedly went to Black Cloud Peak about twice a month. Of course, she went there in disguise. The people on Black Cloud Peak and the people on the mountain all called her Master Chu Junwei. Sometimes she would bring Dark 1 and Dark 2, and sometimes she would bring Dark 3 and Dark 4. The four of them were clearly very interested in the strange martial arts field that was under construction. Occasionally, they would fight in order to be able to go with Yi Li. Mo Xiaoyao obviously knew that Yi Li often went out, but he didn't ask where Yi Li went. Yi Li was very grateful for his tolerance. Occasionally, when she went shopping with Hua Tianxiang and the others, she would remember to bring back some good snacks for him. However, the relationship between the two seemed to have become more distant as Yi Li was busy. Occasionally, when she saw the disapproving eyes of Wei Mema and Lin Mema, Yi Li would feel a little guilty. However, this guilt was quickly put aside. Because she was very busy, very busy. Not only did she have to take care of the affairs of the Wang Fu, she also had to take care of her dowry. The dowry shops were still being operated as they were on the surface, but Yi Li secretly took out almost all of the money from the dowry, including the money sent by Han Mingyu, to buy some properties. This included the 2 residences and 3 shops that were bought in the name of Chu Junwei, as well as the 2 shops in the capital. Xu Qingze had personally arranged for people to take care of these things. Although Xu Qingze didn't understand what she wanted to do, he didn't ask anything and did as he was told. In less than half a month, the deeds to the residences and shops were sent to her. In the eyes of outsiders, Yi Li seemed to be a perfect princess consort. Every day, she handled the affairs of the Wang Fu in an orderly manner, and from time to time, she would attend all kinds of gatherings between the nobles in the capital. However, they didn't know that Yi Li was secretly gathering all kinds of information and finding some useful clues. Therefore, the scheming between the emperor and the empress dowager, the power struggles between the officials in court, and the secret gossip between the nobles, Yi Li coldly watched as they slowly flowed past her eyes. She also gained a deeper understanding of the disputes in the capital and the situation in the imperial court. Your Highness. Wang Fei. Prince fainted. Yi Li was sitting in the accounting room, lost in thought while looking at the account books. Qing Xia rushed in and shouted in a panic. Yi Li was shocked. She immediately stood up and asked, "What's going on?" Qing Xia, who had always been calm, was clearly frightened. She said with a sobbing voice, "Just now, Prince went back to his room, and asked where Princess Consort went. The servants said that Wang Fei was in the accounting room." Before Prince could say anything, Prince suddenly vomited a lot of blood, and then he fainted. Yi Li's heart trembled. She threw down the brush in her hand and walked out. As she walked, she asked, "Has a doctor been called?" Qing Xia said, "A Jing and Qing Luan have both gone. Qing Yu knows a bit of medicine." She and Qing Shuang stayed in the room to take care of Prince. Without waiting for Qing Xia to finish, Yi Li's figure had already quickly disappeared around the corner of the corridor. Returning to the yard, the Yahuan in the yard were clearly frightened. When they saw Yi Li, they even forgot to go forward and bow. Yi Li stepped into the room. Turning around the screen, she saw Mo Xiaoyao lying on the bed. His face was as white as paper, and his lips were still stained with dark red blood. "Your Highness." Qing Yu, who had been taking Mo Xiaoyao's pulse, stood up and said in a low voice, "How is he?" Qing Yu said somewhat worriedly, Prince had once suffered a very serious injury. It seems that he did not properly nurse himself, so his body is actually very weak. Suddenly vomiting blood is also due to exhaustion. But, if he vomited too much blood, I'm afraid it will be very disadvantageous for Prince. Following Qing Yu's gaze, not far from the bed, there was a large patch of blood that had not completely dried up. It was incomparably dazzling. That huge amount of blood almost made Yi Li frightened. Now, is he all right? Qing Yu shook her head and said, "This servant specializes in medicine and poison. Towards Prince's situation, this servant is truly helpless. But for the time being, there shouldn't be any problems." Yi Li took a deep breath and nodded, saying, "I know. Go see if the doctor has come. Also, ask Chief Steward Mo to come over." Qing Yu and Qing Shuang complied and left. Yi Li sat by the bed and silently looked at the person lying on the bed. She had always heard others say that Prince Ding's body was crippled and that he was plagued with a serious illness. But from the first time Yi Li saw Mo Xiaoyao, he had always been very healthy. Even when it was autumn and she had caught a cold for 2 days, she had not heard him cough once. So Yi Li had long forgotten about the serious illness. She only treated it as a false rumor spread by people outside. In these past few months, they seemed to meet every day. But only now did Yi Li discover that Mo Xiaoyao seemed to be much thinner and more haggard than before. At this time, the faint dark green shadow under his closed eyelids was clearly visible. Yi Li was in a daze when she felt the unconscious person on the bed move slightly. She hurriedly raised her head to look. Just in time to see Mo Xiaoyao slowly open his eyes. 4 eyes met. For a moment, Yi Li only felt speechless. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly. "Li, what's wrong?" After a while, Yi Li looked at him and said, "You just vomited blood." Mo Xiaoyao was stunned. He smiled and said, "I've been a little tired these past 2 days. It's nothing serious." "It's nothing serious." Yi Li only felt a wave of anger rush from the bottom of her heart to her brain. "It's nothing serious even if you vomited blood. What's there to worry about? How much blood do you think you have to waste?" Mo Xiaoyao seemed to be happy to see Yi Li angry. The light in his eyes became brighter and gentler. "It's really nothing serious. I'm used to it. It's going to be winter soon. As long as you rest well, nothing will happen. Li, believe me. I'd be a pig if I believed you." Yi Li glanced at him unhappily. At the same time, she was shocked by his words. Used to it? How could she get used to vomiting blood like that? "You rest first. We'll talk about it when the doctor comes." After a while, a Jin and Qing Luan rushed in with a doctor. It was still the old doctor in Wuyue Nunnery last time. Seeing Mo Xiaoyao who had woken up on the bed, the old doctor waved away Qing Luan and a Jin's hands and said slowly, "I've said that nothing will happen. You young people are too immature." Yi Li stood up and gave up her position to the old doctor so that he could feel her pulse. The old doctor stepped forward to feel her pulse. He frowned and stroked his beard. Yi Li asked, "Doctor, how is it?" The old doctor shook his head and said, "It's nothing. But Prince better be careful. It's fine this time, it doesn't mean that it will be fine next time." Yi Li frowned and said, "If I remember correctly, last time the doctor said that Prince's health was very good." The old doctor raised his grey eyebrows and said, "I didn't say anything wrong. At that time, Prince's health was indeed very good, but now it's obviously very bad." Yi Li looked at him speechlessly. Was there anyone who was healthy at the same time and weak at the same time every year? The old doctor continued, "Prince's body can't stand the cold. As long as winter comes, he has to be careful. But, it shouldn't be so serious now. This time, how long has it been since Prince took medicine? How long has it been since he rested?" Chapter 141. Under Yi Li's glare, Mo Xiaoyao helplessly smiled bitterly. "Your medicine doesn't seem to have any effect," Mo Xiaoyao lightly said as he took out a small bottle of medicine from his sleeve. The old doctor frowned as he took the medicine from Mo Xiaoyao's hand and opened it to check. He said, "That's impossible. It hasn't even been 2 months since it was made. How could it lose its effect?" Yi Li said, "Doctor, I think Prince means that your medicine doesn't have any effect on his body. The old doctor's face sank. He once again took Mo Xiaoyao's hand to check his pulse, but this time it was clearly longer. After a while, the old doctor put down his hand and said with a frown, "I'll first write a prescription for Prince to use. There shouldn't be any problems for now. I need to go back and study the prescription first." Yi Li also knew that this kind of thing couldn't be rushed. She could only nod and say, "Then I'll have to trouble doctor." The old doctor nodded and looked at Yi Li. This old man will say it again. With Prince's condition, he definitely can't overwork himself. The closer it is to winter, the more careful he needs to be. If he didn't do anything these past few years, then his condition wouldn't be so serious right now. Yi Li nodded and said seriously, "I understand. Doctor, please don't worry." She had someone follow the old doctor to get the medicine. After Yi Li settled Mo Xiaoyao down, she was about to get up when someone pulled her from behind. Yi Li turned her head to look at the man on the bed who was calmly looking at her. Her gaze fell on his somewhat pale and thin hand. Her heart couldn't help but twitch. "What's wrong? Where do you feel uncomfortable?" Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and said with a faint smile, "Is Li very busy?" It's fine. There were some things in the study that needed to be taken care of, but it wasn't anything urgent. She was just used to taking care of things in her hands. Then, "Can Li stay with me for a while?" Mo Xiaoyao said softly. He looked at Yi Li with a gentle gaze, but Yi Li couldn't bring herself to reject him. Silently returning to the bedside, the smile in her eyes deepened as she looked at the man lying on the bed. Yi Li glanced at the dark red stains on the floor that had not been cleaned up in time and asked worriedly, "Don't you want to sleep for a while?" Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and said indifferently, "It's a bit cold, I can't sleep." Yi Li remembered that people who had lost a lot of blood would indeed feel very cold. Perhaps people who had vomited blood would also feel the same. She unconsciously reached out to pull up the blanket for him and asked, "Do you need charcoal?" It was just the beginning of winter, so it wasn't too cold. However, many people had already lit charcoal fires in their houses. Many noble families had prepared large amounts of silver charcoal. Because Yi Li's body was very good, after Lady Shu had passed away, no one had used charcoal in the winter. Since they didn't have any charcoal fires in their rooms, she hadn't noticed this problem. After all, Mo Xiaoyao's internal energy was much stronger than hers. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head helplessly. "I can't smell the smoke from charcoal fires. Although the special silver charcoal is said to be odorless and smokeless, but... Li, do you understand now? Once winter comes, I really am a cripple." As he said this, Mo Xiaoyao's eyes were filled with bitterness and sorrow. Yi Li got up and took out another blanket from the cupboard to cover Mo Xiaoyao's body. She then asked with a frown, "What kind of injury did you suffer? Why is it so strange?" Normally, when both legs were crippled, even if they were amputated, they would only have occasional hallucinations and pain. However, Mo Xiaoyao couldn't stand the cold. Once winter came, his body would become weak. It definitely had nothing to do with his legs. Also, he couldn't breathe in smoke. It should be a problem with his respiratory system or lungs. Mo Xiaoyao said, "I don't know what kind of injury I suffered. When I woke up, it was already more than a month later. My body was already like this." Mo Xiaoyao's expression was indifferent, as if he was just stating a fact. However, Yi Li had seen this kind of expression many times. Many of his comrades who had been seriously injured on the battlefield would have this kind of indifferent expression after they woke up and calmed down from their madness. However, it was even more heartbreaking than when they were shouting crazily. Yi Li didn't know what kind of expression Mo Xiaoyao would have when he woke up and found himself like this. However, his current calm expression made her feel very uncomfortable. "All right, then according to the doctor's instructions. I'll have to trouble Prince to rest more. I heard that Prince has been spending an average of 14 hours in the study room every day." Yi Li raised her eyebrows. Mo Xiaoyao stared blankly and sighed softly. "Li, I will pay attention. But now wasn't the time to rest." In this half a year, the situation in the imperial court had become more and more strange. Ding King's residence seemed to be outside the imperial court, but if they weren't careful, they would fall into the abyss. As for him, as Prince Ding, he was duty-bound to shoulder some responsibilities. Yi Li glanced at him with a dangerous gaze and said indifferently, "Is there anything that you can do that I can't? Even so, wait until you really can't handle it. Forgive me for speaking out of turn, Your Highness Prince Ding. No matter how much effort you put in, if you take 99 steps and die at the last step, then it will still be considered a failure. So, before you take the 99 steps, it's best that you consider whether you have the life to take the 100th step." Mo Xiaoyao was silent for a while before he looked at Yi Li and smiled. "Li Li is right. Then, I'll have to trouble Li Li in the future. I thought I was the Ding King's consort." Yi Li said calmly. Mo Xiaoyao said softly, "Of course, you will always be my king's consort." As a result, Yi Li became even busier. Not only did she have to deal with the king's residence's internal affairs, she also had to deal with the external affairs. With Mo Xiaoyao's guidance, Yi Li quickly got the hang of it. Yi Li's swift and decisive style gradually made the stewards in the residence admire her. Chief Steward Mo, Nurse Sun, and the other elders looked at Yi Li with more gratification and respect in their eyes. Chief Steward Mo, Nurse Sun, and the other elders looked at Yi Li with more gratification and respect in their eyes. In order to prevent Mo Xiaoyao from feeling bored while resting in bed, other than meeting with some stewards, Yi Li moved all the other matters from the study to their room. While dealing with matters, she could chat with Mo Xiaoyao and ask any questions at any time. Mo Xiaoyao was surprised to find that his king's consort was like an endless book. He could never guess how many things she knew and where her limits were. If it was another person like this that appeared by his side, Mo Xiaoyao would definitely feel threatened and use all kinds of methods to test and even eliminate them. But facing the woman in front of him who was holding a pen and writing at a high speed while still diverting her attention to chat with him with a smile, he only felt as if there was a faint flame in his cold heart. Although she was smiling, it made people who felt as if they were in a world of ice and snow feel inexplicably warm and comfortable. He only wanted to indulge her in doing what she wanted to do and quietly watch her occasionally reveal a faint smile. He knew that there would be a day when she would blossom and amaze the world. A bright pearl would not be covered in dust forever. There would be a day when she would soar into the heavens. And at that time, he might not be here anymore. Chapter 142. Princess Consort. Chief Steward Mo said that Doctor He is here to deliver the medicine. Qing Yu came in to report. Yi Li looked at Mo Xiaoyao who was sleeping soundly on the bed. She nodded to Qing Yu and said in a low voice, "Dr. He, please wait in the reception pavilion for a moment." Although it had only been a few days, Yi Li could feel that the colder the weather was, the worse it was for Mo Xiaoyao's body. It was probably because the medicine could no longer control Mo Xiaoyao's condition. Even after 2 days of rest, Mo Xiaoyao's spirit did not improve. Entering the reception pavilion, Dr. He and Chief Steward Mo quickly came forward. Yi Li waved her hand and said, "Doctor, Chief Steward Mo, there's no need to be so courteous. Sit down and talk." After Yi Li took her seat, the two of them thanked her and sat down separately. Dr. He took out a prescription and handed it to Yi Li, saying, "This is the prescription that this old man has adjusted over the past few days. Princess Consort, please take a look." Yi Li took the prescription and looked at it. She found that most of the medicine was not for treating illnesses or injuries, but for detoxification. "Dr. He, what is this? If this Fae remembers correctly, it will become addictive if you use too much of this medicine." Yi Li put down the prescription and asked in a deep voice. At the end of the prescription was the name Aphrodite. Yi Li knew what it was and what the consequences would be after using it. "I didn't think that Princess Consort would be proficient in medicine." Princess Consort is right. Aphrodite is an excellent painkiller, but it will become addictive if used for a long time. So, this old man has been hesitating on whether to add it or not. Doctor He said with a serious expression. Yi Li nodded in acceptance of his explanation. Does Prince need to take more painkillers? Very much. The reason why the previous medicine was ineffective was because it could no longer suppress the pain caused by the poison in Prince's body. If he didn't prescribe some painkillers, Prince's mental state would be even worse, and his body would be even weaker. It's even possible that he won't be able to wait for the antidote to be cured. Furthermore, His Highness's current body can't withstand the pain from this distance. This will cause his old injuries to relapse. Doctor, he said in a deep voice. His slightly aged face was filled with exhaustion. It was obvious that he had not had an easy time in the past 2 days. Hearing Mo Xiaoyao's condition, Steward Mo's expression turned ugly. Princess, this. Yi Li shook her head and said, Furong can't be used. You've given her too much. He would become addicted in a month at most. If you become addicted to it, it will do more harm than good. Doctor, he smiled helplessly. He didn't want to add so much blood, but it was too little. Ordinary people would not be able to understand the pain of Prince's poison acting up if they did not personally experience it. Why is he fine in the summer? Yi Li asked. Doctor, he shook his head. It's not that he's fine in the summer, it's just that it's much easier. This is because Prince's body is suffering from a type of cold poison. The summer weather is warm, and with the medicine that I've prepared to restrain the cold poison, as long as he takes it on time, he will be no different from a normal person. But when the weather is cold, the cold poison will wreak havoc. Prince's blood vessels will seem to freeze. In the first 2 years, when it was the worst, he would even fall into a deep sleep. The past few years have been under control, but this year... Is it a problem with the weather? Yi Li paused for a moment before nodding. I understand. Doctor, please consider the prescription again. Also, what's the antidote for the cold poison? Doctor, he shook his head. There's no antidote at the moment. Prince's cold poison was caused by the northern tribes at the border. At that time, we invited the divine Dr. Shenyang to treat the prince. The cold poison was born on a snowy peak at the border between the northern tribes and Xiling. It could be said that it was a kind of cold liquid in the coldest place in the world. It's said to grow in a cold pond at the peak of the snowy mountain. That cold pond is bone-chilling. No matter if it's man or beast, there's no chance of survival. But there's a flower called Raging Fire Lotus growing in the cold pond. Only its lotus seed can restrain the cold poison in Prince's body. Before Doctor he finished speaking, Chief Steward Mo continued, but that Raging Fire Lotus blooms once every 10 years, and bears fruit once every 15 years. 6 years ago, the Black Cloud Cavalry sent people to wait at the foot of the mountain. Unfortunately, it'll take at least 2 more years for the lotus seed to mature. Chief Steward Mo didn't say that even if they obtained the lotus seed at that time, the Black Cloud Cavalry would have to pay a terrible price to return to the Da state through Xiling. But no matter what price they had to pay, the Black Cloud Cavalry would definitely obtain the Raging Fire Lotus and successfully return it to the Da state. Even if they had to sacrifice the lives of the entire Black Cloud Cavalry. That divine Dr. Shen doesn't have any other methods? Yi Li asked with a frown. She had heard of divine Dr. Shenyang's reputation when she was still in her boudoir. He was indeed a divine doctor that even the emperor might not be able to invite. Doctor, he said, divine Dr. Shen heard a year ago that the Eastern Sea Island country has a medicinal herb called Phoenix's Tail. It has miraculous effects on cold poison. At the beginning of this year, he brought people out to see. I'm afraid he won't be back until the end of December at the earliest. Yi Li nodded and said, I understand. Then I'll have to trouble Doctor He. Doctor He stood up and bid farewell. Chief Steward Mo remained in the main hall. He looked at Yi Li with a frown. His mood was very gloomy. Princess. Yi Li raised her head and saw Chief Steward Mo's serious but worried face. She sighed and said, Chief Steward Mo, it's been hard on you these years. Chief Steward Mo shook his head in fear and said, what is Princess saying? This old servant only hates that I can't replace the prince to suffer this pain. Back then, the prince. Seeing the little master who was in high spirits back then become like this, how could Chief Steward Mo feel good? But he was more worried about this young princess now. In the past half a year, the princess's performance had already exceeded everyone's expectations. The people in the Ding King's residence also sincerely admired this new mistress. The princess of the Ding King's residence didn't need to be a beauty that could cause the downfall of a city, didn't need to be overflowing with talent, and didn't even need to be extravagant. She only needed to be strong enough. But no matter how strong a woman was, she wouldn't be able to withstand the current situation. This was also the reason why the prince had always hidden his physical condition from him. As servants, they had never mentioned it in front of the princess. Yi Li stood up and smiled faintly. Chief Steward Mo doesn't need to be too worried. As long as the person is still alive, there will be a way. Later on, Chief Steward Mo can help me find some people who are proficient in construction. I have a use for them. Chief Steward Mo looked at Yi Li's figure as she slowly walked away. His dim eyes couldn't help but light up. This princess might really be different. This old servant understands. When Yi Li returned to the room, Mo Xiaoyao had already woken up. The moment she entered the room, Yi Li clearly saw that Mo Xiaoyao's left hand that was clenched tightly outside the blanket was trembling and spasming. But when he saw Yi Li enter the room, he relaxed and then withdrew back into the blanket as if nothing had happened. Yi Li knew that he was enduring the pain. Her heart couldn't help but waver when she ordered Dr. He to remove the painkillers. But when she saw Mo Xiaoyao's gentle but firm gaze, Yi Li suppressed the hesitation in her heart. Mo Xiaoyao definitely wouldn't like himself to become a person who had to rely on some kind of medicine to survive. Chapter 143. Li Li, you're back. Yi Li sat by the bed. You can scream if it hurts. Mo Xiaoyao smiled. Won't it hurt if I scream? Don't worry, it's just a little bit of pain. It's just that it's a bit annoying to lie in bed all day because I can't get up. I won't laugh at you, Yi Li said. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her quietly. After a long time, he asked in a low voice, Li Li, can I hug you? Yi Li was startled. She bent down and hugged Mo Xiaoyao along with the blanket. She smiled and said, you can't catch a cold right now. Just put up with it. Mo Xiaoyao let out a low laugh. After a while, he stopped and said in a low voice, actually, the pain is still bearable. But that cold feeling, it's like falling into a cold pond full of ice water, and it's a feeling that you'll never be able to climb out of. I've gotten used to the pain for a long time, but I can't get used to that cold feeling. Sometimes, I even feel that it's okay if it hurts a little. I'm afraid that one day, I won't even feel the pain anymore. All that's left is that cold feeling. If that's the case, Li Li, I really don't know if I'll be able to hold on. That won't happen. Yi Li hugged him and said softly, didn't Divine Dr. Shen go to the East Sea to look for phoenix tailgrass? In another 2 years, the raging fire lotus will bear seeds. At that time, the cold poison will be cured and everything will be fine. You've been able to hold on until now. What's 2 more years? Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, of course I'll wait. Li Li, if I don't die, you'll never be able to leave me. Aren't you afraid? Before I married you, I didn't want you to die early so that I could receive your inheritance. Yi Li said lightly. I definitely won't die, Li Li. Mo Xiaoyao reached out and wrapped an arm around Yi Li's slender waist. Yi Li was stunned. She pulled his hand down and stuffed it back into the quilt expressionlessly. Don't mess around if you can't stand the cold. She seemed to have made a promise just now, but she didn't seem to have said anything. Yi Li pondered silently. Once it was winter, the Ding King's residents rejected all the invitations and gatherings, including the palace banquet. The reason was the same as usual. Prince Ding was seriously ill. The hearts of the people who had been stirred up by the sighting of Prince Ding during the summer gradually calmed down. After the imperial physicians in the palace went back and forth a few times to no avail, other than the continuous flow of various tonics and medicinal herbs from the palace into the Ding King's manor, no one else came to disturb them. The Ding King's residence seemed to have regained its silence from the past 2 years. Of course, it wasn't that there were no visitors at all. For example, Feng Jiao was one of them. Third young Master Feng, the princess consort and the prince have invited you to the side chamber. Feng Jiao, who was waiting in the study, raised his eyebrows and asked in puzzlement, Our Yarrow is ill again? But isn't he staying with the princess consort? Why did he move to the side chamber? A faint smile appeared on Director Mo's stern face. Many thanks for young Master Feng's concern. The prince is fine these few days. A few days ago, the prince and the princess consort moved to the side chamber. Feng Jiao's face was filled with envy. jealousy, and hatred. It's good to have a large manor. If you want to live in the main hall, you can live in the main hall. If you want to live in the side chamber, you can live in the side chamber. If you're tired of living in the side chamber, you can take turns living in a few courtyards. Director Mo already knew Feng Jiao's temperament and didn't find it strange. He smiled faintly and said, "If young Master Feng dislikes the small manor, you can tell the prince. The king's residence has 2 mansions in the capital for young Master Feng to live in." Feng Jiao rolled his eyes. "Forget it. When the manor is big, there are so many people and things to do. It's so annoying. Young Master Feng should start a family." Director Mo followed behind Feng Jiao and said, "I know. Your prince has married a good princess consort. This young master hasn't played enough." Feng Jiao waved his hand to indicate that the matter of marriage could be discussed in the future. His old man didn't care about this matter, but the elders in the king's residence were rather enthusiastic. It was a pity that he couldn't enjoy it. The side chamber that Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao lived in was a separate building to the south of the main courtyard where the two lived. It was located in the inner garden of the main courtyard. It was only 2 side rooms less than the main hall. It looked more peaceful and elegant. When Feng Jiao stepped into the main hall, he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. A gust of warm air hit him in the face. The entire main hall was warm and cozy like it was March or April. Feng Jiao knew about Mo Xiaoyao's physical condition. He also knew that as long as Mo Xiaoyao could appear in the Prince Ding mansion, they definitely wouldn't burn charcoal in the winter. But here, Director Mo followed behind and said, "Young Master Feng, the prince and princess consort are waiting for you in the small study." Feng Jiao couldn't help but turn around and ask, "How many study rooms does your king's residence have?" Director Mo replied seriously, "The outer courtyard and inner courtyard each have a library and study room. In the main courtyard, the prince and princess consort each have a study room. The study room in this side chamber was set up temporarily. This young master hates study rooms, and hates discussing matters in study rooms even more." Feng Jiao said. "Then, this subordinate will ask princess consort and prince to come out? Forget it. I don't dare to ask them to come out and see me personally." Feng Jiao waved his hand and swaggered away while fanning himself. When he stepped into the study room and saw the 2 people sitting in the room playing chess, Feng Jiao felt like he was about to envy Mo Xiaoyao's days. "I say, Prince, it's not right to let others work themselves to death outside while you play chess at home." Feng Jiao lazily leaned against the door and lightly mocked. How could people be mentally balanced in this world? Those who had a hard life had to rush about in the cold wind and rain all day, just like him. Those who had a good life could leisurely sit in a warm study room and play chess, accompanied by a beauty. Just like Mo Xiaoyao. Yi Li smiled and glanced at Feng Jiao. Although young Master Feng's coquettish face was filled with displeasure, the smile in his eyes was more genuine than usual. It could be seen that he was not in a bad mood. Mo Xiaoyao put down a piece and then raised his head to look at Feng Jiao, asking, "What is it?" Feng Jiao slowly walked in while fanning himself, saying, "Can't I come to see you if there's nothing? Marrying a princess really is different. At this time in the past, you would be lying in bed half dead." Feng Jiao clearly did not mind poking at Mo Xiaoyao's scars. He swaggered to the side and found a place to sit down. He examined the furnishings in the room and said, "A few days ago, Chief Steward Mo had Lunger find someone skilled in construction. Was it for this side hall? Not bad, it really is not bad. Princess consort sister-in-law, can this little brother also have a set?" Even someone as experienced and knowledgeable as the 3rd young Master Feng couldn't figure out what was going on in this warm room. It was fine if he did not understand. It did not prevent him from knowing what it was used for. In the middle of winter, who would have the patience to burn charcoal that was as expensive as silver? It smelled bad, it was inconvenient, and it was not as warm. Yi Li said with a faint smile, "Actually, I don't really understand these things. If young Master Feng is interested, you can go find those craftsmen to discuss it." The ancient craftsman's wisdom was not to be underestimated. She had only drawn a rough design and put forward her own ideas and principles. Those experienced craftsmen had used less than half a month to set up this side hall's water heating system. No wonder people said that there were many lost crafts that even the machines of the 21st century could not make. Feng Zhiyao's eyes lit up. They are all Leng Er's people. Many thanks, Princess Consort. This young master will go find him tomorrow. When he had a warm room like this, he would hold a banquet in the Fu. He wanted to see if those arrogant fellows would drool in envy. Prince, did that fellow Leng Er say that we can use this to earn a fortune? Of course, we will not forget Princess Consort's contributions. Thinking that Yi Li was the original creator of this room, Feng Zhiyao did not forget to give her a flattering smile. Chapter 144. Mo Xiaoyao held a chess piece and said, Leng Er calculated that it would cost at least 17,000 taels to make a greenhouse like this. Even if the cost would slowly decrease after it matures, it wouldn't be less than 15,000 taels. If the cost is too high, how many people do you think would be willing to spend this kind of money? Feng Zhiyao thought for a moment before shaking his head and saying, there really wouldn't be too many. There were many nobles in the capital and even more rich people. But if the cost of just this side hall was more than 10,000 taels, there wouldn't be many people willing to spend 20 to 30,000 taels to build a greenhouse. If it was just for a profit of 100 to 200,000 taels, there really wasn't a need. At least for now, there was no reason not to. Yi Li said with a smile, actually, Master Feng's idea isn't bad. If the cost can be reduced to around 1,000 taels, there's still a market. Feng Zhiyao was disdainful. What can 1,000 taels make? If it's only around 1,000 taels, then the nobles in the capital, the rich merchants, and even the average well-off merchant would likely choose a greenhouse instead of silver charcoal. Then what if it's the entire Da Chu state, or even shilling northern militants? Yi Li said with a faint smile. Feng Zhiyao paused. Seeing that Mo Xiaoyao didn't seem to have any intention of interrupting, he muttered to himself, I'll mention it to Leng Er later. The Leng Er you're talking about should be the second young master of the Leng family, Leng Haoyu, right? Yi Li asked. I don't seem to have heard that second young master Leng is close to Prince. Leng Haoyu was different from Feng Zhiyao and Mo Xiaoyao, who had grown up together. He was a few years younger than them. When Mo Xiaoyao was in trouble, Leng Haoyu should have only been a 12 or 13-year-old child. Moreover, the Leng family was loyal to the emperor. Feng Zhiyao nodded and looked strangely at Mo Xiaoyao as he asked, did the prince not mention this to the Wang Fei? Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, I sent a message to Leng Haoyu to have him come to the Wangfu. He doesn't seem to be free. Feng Zhiyao seemed to have thought of something. He lowered his head and chuckled. 2 days ago, Leng Er went to drink with prostitutes and was bumped into by his future father-in-law. He was severely beaten up by General Murong. I reckon he still can't leave the house. With Leng Er's personality, he definitely wouldn't reply to Mo Xiaoyao and say that he was beaten up and couldn't leave the house. Yi Li was startled and asked in surprise, second young master Leng was beaten up by General Murong? That's right. Wang Fei didn't see it at that time, but General Murong really didn't show any mercy. Poor Leng Haoyu, that kid, was not loved by his parents. Perhaps he was still lying in bed and ignored. Later, this young master should go and see him. Feng Zhiyao gloated. Yi Li summoned someone to pour a cup of hot tea for Feng Zhiyao before asking, since young master Lang is Prince's friend, is he injured? He's injured. Should we send someone to take a look? Mo Xiaoyao said, just let Feng Zhiyao go. Without waiting for Feng Zhiyao to answer, he said to him, when he can go out, let him come over. Feng Zhiyao knew that Mo Xiaoyao wouldn't let them come to the Wangfu if there wasn't a proper matter. He immediately put away the lazy smile on his face and nodded. What orders does the prince have? Mo Xiaoyao took the file that Yi Li handed over and said, this was just sent over from Nanjiang. Take a look. Feng Zhiyao glanced at Yi Li, opened the file and read it carefully. The more he read, the uglier his expression became. When Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li finished their game of chess and left to put the chess pieces back into the box, he raised his head and said, Mo Jingli secretly funded the rebellion of the Saintess of Nanjiang? What's going on? If I remember correctly, The crown princess of Nanjiang should be Princess Shixia's younger sister. In the future, once the crown princess succeeds the throne, Nanzhao will become Mo Jingli's greatest support. Mo Xiaoyao held the warm teacup and said lightly, "Don't forget that the king of Nanzhao is only 40 years old this year. As long as there are no accidents, the crown princess will have to wait at least 20 years to succeed the throne. The king of Nanzhao and Princess Shixia are also father and daughter. Would he not support his own son-in-law?" Feng Zhiyao said. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and said, "I have interacted with the king of Nanzhao before. At the time, he was still the crown prince of Nanzhao. He is very cautious and smart. He definitely would not support Mo Jingli. If he would, 2 years ago when Mo Xiaoyao went to Nanzhao, he would have married Princess Shixia to him and not have waited for Princess Shixia to come all the way to Dachu State. The king of Nanzhao must have been very unhappy in the match in June. The chances of either him or the crown princess supporting Mo Jingli are not high." Feng Zhiyao lowered his head to look at the file in his hand and said, "This is also the analysis." Then, when did Mo Jingli hook up with the Saintess of Nanjiang? Feng Zhiyao felt that they had really underestimated Mo Jingli in these past years. In his eyes, Mo Jingli had always been a hot-tempered fool. Even though he was a high and mighty imperial son and he was only the bastard son of a wealthy merchant, he had never thought much of Mo Jingli. But looking at the messy affairs in Jing these past 2 years, which one of them did not involve Mo Jingli? Especially in the past half-year, he had discovered that there were many officials in court who supported the king of Li. It should have happened when he went to Nanjiang. After all, he had stayed in Nanjiang for a long time, Mo Xiaoyao said with a frown. "Do you think that person in the palace knows about this matter now?" Feng Zhiyao asked curiously. The brothers of the imperial family fighting each other was the most interesting. "They shouldn't know. Your subordinates haven't received any news yet, have they?" Mo Xiaoyao said. Feng Zhiyao's face darkened. He was in charge of receiving all kinds of news in the Ding King's manor. Now that the news from Nanzhao had already reached his manor, his subordinates had not received any news at all. Of course, he knew that it was not that Mo Xiaoyao did not trust him. If he did not trust him, Mo Xiaoyao would not have so easily shown him the news. But knowing that someone was more powerful than him was always uncomfortable. "You don't need to feel ashamed. This news has not spread out yet. Other than the people who have seen this file, no one else knows." Mo Xiaoyao did not want to hurt his good friend too much and said, "But I cannot tell you the source of this news. Think of a way to hand it over to Mo Jingqi." "Hand it over to Mo Jingqi?" Feng Zhiyao raised his brows. "Won't he go crazy with anger? But it's also good to let them fight among themselves. That way, we will have more time to do other things. Do we need to send people to Nanjiang? Although the current chaos in Nanjiang is beneficial to us, it may not be so in the long run. Nanzhao's people were valiant. Just like Zhu, they had long coveted Dachu State's vast territory and abundant resources. However, their country was too weak. They had been defeated by Dachu State several times and had no choice but to submit to Dachu State. Right now, we have no one to send. There should be someone in Nanjiang who can handle it. Let's not worry about it for now. Is there any news from the northern tribes?" Feng Zhiyao snorted softly. After Xi Ling and Dachu State's marriage alliance failed, their secret dealings with the northern tribes have become more frequent. I'm afraid that Lei Tongfeng has also sensed the problem between Mo Jingli and Mo Jingqi, so he decisively changed his mind. He plans to wait for Dachu State's internal strife before joining forces with the northern tribes to attack. Chapter 145. Lei Tongfeng, the Dachu State is internally unstable. Does he think that Shilling will be any better? Mo Xiaoyao's smile was cold. He frowned and said, "Mr. Shen should be back soon, right?" Feng Zhiyao paused and said, "He should be back soon. When he comes back, invite him to Shilling." Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said, "I heard that the Emperor of Shilling has also been ill for a long time. Divine Dr. Shen's medical skills are outstanding and he will probably be interested." Feng Zhiyao raised his eyebrows and smiled. "The Emperor of Shilling and Genom of Gojosian? That seems like a good idea. I just don't know if the healthy emperor of Shilling can tolerate Shilling having such a nameless but powerful regent. Yi Li sat quietly on the side and listened to the two discuss the matters of the countries. Unconsciously, she fell into a trance. She understood many of the things that had happened in Jing City in the past half-year. She had seen the emperor and the empress dowager using Prince Li's help in and out of the court. She hadn't thought that Mo Jingli would even involve Nanzhao. When the three of them were scheming against each other, did they think that some of the people they were scheming against were secretly working for the rise and fall of this country? Li, what do you think Mo Jingli would benefit from secretly helping the Saintess of Nanjiang? As she was lost in her thoughts, she suddenly heard Mo Xiaoyao ask. Yi Li paused and frowned. Even if Mo Jingli has the Empress Dowager's support, he may not be a match for the emperor. First of all, he is at a disadvantage in public opinion and morality. The emperor was the previous emperor's successor and is his brother. After the registration, he has treated him well. Rashly opposing the emperor has no benefits for him. I think. Mo Jingli has always placed too much importance on Nanzhao. On the surface, he has gained more than he has lost because of Princess Xixia. Therefore, Nanzhao must have some faction or person that he can rely on. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, Li is right. We all feel that Mo Jingli has changed too quickly over the years. But, if one looked carefully, they would discover that he had only started to change after returning from the southern border. It was just that most people didn't notice this change. I'm sure that Mo Jingli may have been ambitious before this, but he definitely didn't have any intention of seizing the throne. Yi Li stood up and took out a map from a nearby cabinet. She unfolded it on the table and said, I don't know what the southern border has that makes him so confident. But in my opinion, if we can control the entire southern border, then even if Mo Jingli fails to seize the throne, the one who loses will not be him. Feng Jiao curiously moved over and asked, What do you mean? Yi Li pointed at the map and said, Mo Jingli's fief is in Ling province. It is only 300 li away from Nanzhao. The Dhu state's imperial family has decreed that the prince of the imperial family only needs to live in Jing for 2 months each year. But Mo Jingli, because of the concern of the Empress Dowager and the virtuous consort, stays in Jing for many years and doesn't return to his fief. Of course, this could also be the emperor guarding against Mo Jingli. But Ling province is still the Li king's fief. Looking at the Li king's confidence, Ling province is completely under his control. Once Nanzhao fully supports the Li king and attacks Ling province from the outside, Yong province between Nanzhao and Ling province will also be in the bag. East of Ling province is flat land. If there is enough army, the Li king can go all the way east and control most of the southwest. The reinforcements from the court, even the fastest Black Cloud cavalry, will need at least 20 days to arrive. They also need to cross the Yunnan River that runs through the entire Dhu state. As far as I know, the Dhu state doesn't have an army that is skilled in water battles. That includes the Mohist army and the Black Cloud cavalry. As her slender white hands made light gestures, Feng Jiao's expression gradually became ugly. He was more familiar with the geography of Nanzhao and the Dhu state than Yi Li. He naturally knew what would happen if the two armies faced each other. The Dhu states east of Ling province had always been peaceful. It was also far from the border, so there were very few troops stationed there. If Mo Jingli truly allied with Nanzhao to march southeast instead of Nanzhao's habit of going north, as long as they passed Shattered Snow Pass in Yong province, it could be said that half of the Dhu state south of the Yunnan River would be given away for free. If Mo Jingli is truly working with Nanzhao, it is the same as treason. He will not do such a thing. Feng Jiao gritted his teeth. However, Yi Li's words still left a deep mark in his heart. If Mo Jingli truly did such a thing, the consequences would be unthinkable. Yao! Feng Jiao turned to Mo Xiaoyao, who was deep in thought, hoping to receive his approval. Mo Xiaoyao's brows furrowed slightly as if he hadn't heard Feng Jiao's words. He stared at the map that Yi Li had placed in front of him, thinking about something. After a while, he said lightly, with Mo Jingli's personality, if he is forced into a corner, he might do something. Feng-san, I want information on Nanjiang. The more detailed, the better. Feng Jiao nodded and said, I understand. It will be delivered to you within half a month. Should we reveal it to that person in the palace? Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and said, if he knows now, he will immediately lead his troops south. Mo Jingli could not tolerate others coveting his country. If he really knew of this guess, even if Mo Jingli didn't want to, he would be forced to. Feng Zhiyao said in confusion, if Mo Jingli really has such thoughts, isn't it best to get rid of him before his wings are fully grown? Mo Xiaoyao sighed softly. If we attack Nanjiao now, it will only make the king of Nanjiao and the saintess of Nanjiang put down their conflict and unite against the outside world. And we will likely be attacked from both sides by Shilling and the northern tribes. Originally, we wanted to deal with either Shilling or the northern tribes first. Since Nanjiao does not want to stay put, then, let's think of a way to deal with them first. Deal with them? Feng Zhiyao and Yi Li both looked at Mo Xiaoyao. It was hard to believe that in such a short time, he had already thought of a way to deal with Nanjiao. Mo Xiaoyao frowned and said, since the people of Nanjiang find it too boring to do anything, let them be busy for a while. Brother Shu seems to have a good relationship with the crown princess of Nanjiao. Yi Li nodded mildly. Since Shu Qingchen had said this in front of them, he must have no intention of hiding it. Mo Xiaoyao raised his brows and smiled. Since Jing Li secretly supports the saintess of Nanjiang as the monarch of Da Chu state, and Nanjiao has always been on good terms with Da Chu state, it is not unreasonable for the Da Chu state to give some support to the Nanjiao royal family. Feng San, suppress Jing Li's news for now. There is no need to let Mo Jingqi know. Feng Zhiyao nodded and smiled. Good idea. But Mo Jingqi won't listen to you. In reality, it was impossible for Mo Xiaoyao to give any advice to Mo Jingqi. No matter whether his advice was beneficial or harmful to the Da Chu state, Mo Jingqi would never accept it. Mo Xiaoyao was not worried about this. There will always be someone he will listen to. Also, Shattered Snow Pass, just in case, we must have a capable person to guard it. Who is guarding Shattered Snow Pass right now? General Yunhui, Guanzhong. Feng Zhiyao answered. If I remember correctly, Guanzhong has never won a battle in his life. Mo Xiaoyao frowned. Although Guanzhong had no connection to the Mohist army, he still had some impression of this name. Feng Zhiyao raised his brows and smiled disdainfully. In reality, he has only fought 3 battles in his life. The first 2 were General Murong's deputy who followed along and gained a lot of military merit. The last battle was to suppress bandits. Panlong Mountain had 800 bandits. He used 5,000 soldiers and lost 1,700. But in the end, he won. In addition, the last time he went to the battlefield was 7 years ago. But, the most important thing is, Prince, you have a grudge against him. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.